and takes a couple of seconds to load up once you hit live.
And I'll go ahead and share my screen here soon.
You're good to go. So we're live right now, so on YouTube. And I'm going to record on here too. Okay.
I got my clock again, Fred. Sorry.
Okay.
Sandy and Adam, you guys want unmuted?
Yeah.
Diana, you okay? Okay.
I didn't mean to do that, so.
I wanted to see if I could. It'd be helpful if I could go back and forth because I could type during, and otherwise it might sound like I'm hammering in your ears. But that's okay. I'll just remember everything.
Hey, Adam, let me
Yes.
try and make you co-host. Maybe you'll be able to do it then. Oh, it's not letting me do a co-host for some reason. That's weird.
Yes, you are.
I'll just keep an eye on you.
Yeah, that's okay. We'll survive.
Just give
Plus
me the
we're
thumbs
recording.
up.
Need
Give
a
me the
little
thumbs up if you want on.
It says unmute.
I don't understand why it won't let me do that.
All right. I guess we can get started. I don't know, John, if you want to let people in now or.
Mhm. Okay, coming in.
Okay.
Okay, Dan, you're good to go.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Cuyahoga Falls Planning Commission, I would like to welcome everybody to our meeting this evening. And before we go ahead and get started, we would like to stick to our process, and that is we start off every meeting with a pledge of allegiance. So I'll ask everyone to just please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Obviously, this is a system that we're all getting used to, the Zoom process. Normally, we would obviously be together at the Cuyahoga Falls Auditorium, but unfortunately, that's not an option that we have. And so this is our next best process. And so I will kind of explain how this evening will go after we enter the agenda into the record. But I thank you all very much for joining us this evening. And so once Commissioner Locascio reads the agenda into the record, I will kind of explain the process for this evening. So Commissioner Locascio, if you would not mind, please reading the agenda items into the record.
Do you think you could make it one size bigger?
How's that?
Awesome. And then
Whoop.
I'll be able to scroll
Sorry.
down to do that.
There, okay.
Wednesday, November 4th, 2020, a scheduled meeting of the Cog Falls Planning Commission will be held as a Zoom meeting at 6 o'clock. The following files will be heard. Agenda items, new business. Section 1113 -07 zoning map amendment. The applicant, Walsh Islands, is requesting a map amendment for parcels 35-00402 and 35-00517 for 4344 and 4356 Wyoga Lake Road. These parcels are currently zoned E1 Employment District. The applicant is requesting a map amendment to R5 Mixed Density Residential. A map amendment will allow for the development of a 69-lot, single-family residential subdivision.
That is wrong. That's from the original one. I didn't catch that. It should be the map amendment for the development of a 200-unit multifamily or attached single-family development.
So that's in the minute. That's recorded, right?
Right.
And
Sorry.
That's okay. Map dash 20-00006. Map dash 20-0041, section 113.07 zoning map amendment. William Marvel is requesting a zoning map amendment for parcel 02-00234. The zoning map amendment from R4 urban density residential to MU4 suburban corridor will allow the parcel to be included in the site area for the construction of a new Dairy Queen restaurant. Conditional zoning request CZ-20-0042. Applicant Cartwright, represented by Architectural Alliance, has applied for a conditional zoning certificate for the use of 4095 State Road as an outdoor sales lot. The subject property is zoned MU3 suburban center. The property is currently owned by Mayest Limited. Sorry. Sales lot is a conditional use in the MU3 district. The applicant wishes to utilize the existing site as an outdoor sales lot for used motor vehicles and renovate the existing building, formerly a Burger King restaurant, for a used car showroom and service. And then the minutes from our October 6th, 2020 and October 20th, 2020 meetings are submitted.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Locascio. I really appreciate that. And so the way we're going to operate our planning commission meeting is very similar to how we would do it if we were at the Cuyahoga Falls Auditorium. And I'd just like to give a little bit of this background information because sometimes, we don't maybe explain how our meetings work, and it can be a little intimidating and different for people to understand. And so what I'd like to do is just kind of talk about how this evening's meeting will go. We will first hear and open up the hearing on file number MAP-20-0006. And the city of Cuyahoga Falls will actually present the information on this file. Once the city is completed with their presentation regarding the file, we will close the hearing to the city of Cuyahoga Falls, and we will open up the hearing for the applicant to add any additional information that could be helpful to us in our deliberations this evening. Once the applicant has completed their presentation, we will then open up the hearing to the general public, and we will give the general public an opportunity to comment on the file. And that's where the general public's role is really helpful, because we, as your fellow citizens and volunteers in the city of Cuyahoga Falls, we're here tonight to make the best decision and recommendation possible based upon information that's presented to us. So if there's additional information that would help clarify the file, any concerns you have regarding the files, that would be the opportunity for the members of the general public to weigh in. When that happens, I will ask two things. One, if you could just raise your hand on the device and actually, John, I think I can actually demonstrate this, can't I? Yeah, I could. So I'm going to go ahead and raise my hand, indicating that I would like to speak. When that happens, if you could just, I will recognize you to speak. And then members of the general public will have anywhere from 2 to 3 minutes. We try to keep it within a reasonable amount because we have a lot of business this evening. But generally, please speak to the issue that you'd like to share with us. John, our technology wizard with the City of Cuyahoga Falls, will unmute you and give you that opportunity. And then we'll go down through the list of anybody who else wants to speak. And the idea being, we just want to give people an opportunity to share any information that will help us in our decision making. We want to give everybody a chance to speak first, and then if somebody maybe has something else they'd like to add, we can go through that process again. But we try to make it as fair and balanced as we can. Once the public portion of the hearing is closed, we will close that portion and open up to the members of the Planning Commission. And the members of the Planning Commission will then ask questions of both the city and the applicant, as well as address any information that was raised by the general public. And so that's the process for this evening. I hope that's helpful. And if anybody has any questions right now, I'll be happy to entertain them and look and see if there's anybody raising their hand right now. I do not see that. And then just when you do actually, if you want to speak, the only thing we also request, in addition to making sure we focus on the file itself and any new information that will help us in our deliberations, just please state your name and address for the record, because this is being recorded. This is an official meeting. We are an extension of the government of the City of Cuyahoga Falls, and we take our jobs very seriously. So that's why we're going to be focusing on everybody who's speaking at the time, so we can make the best decision possible or best recommendation possible to the City of Cuyahoga Falls Council. So I hope that's helpful. Like I said, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those, but that's the process for this evening. As you can see, we have a full agenda here this night, and not seeing any questions raised there. I'm going to go ahead and move on to our first file, and that is file MAP-20-0006. Section 113. He took it away there. 113.07 zoning map amendment. Mr. Guerrero?
All right. Sorry. All right. Again, this is for the rezoning of 4344 and 4356 Wyoga Lake Road. And I'll go through the description again, since it wasn't correct on the agenda. The applicant, Walsh Highlands LLC, is requesting a map amendment for parcels 35-00402 and 35-00517. These parcels are currently zoned E1 Employment District, and the applicant is requesting a map amendment to R5 Mixed Density Residential. The map amendment would allow for the development of a 200-unit townhome apartment development. The property is on the northern section of Wyoga Lake Road between Steele's Corners and Season Road on the west side of the street. It is around 36 acres, 37 acres. It's currently zoned E1 Employment District. The applicant is Walsh Highlands LLC at 10474 Broadview Road, Broadview Heights, Ohio. The applicant representative is Greg Moda, Petros Homes, and Danny Karam, Karen Company at 265 Portage Trail Extension. The owner is the Pelia Family Trust. And again, the code references are 1113.07 zoning map amendment, 1131.05 zoning district and use tables, 1132.07 R5 mixed density residential, and 1132.01 residential lot and dimension standard. As we look at these areas, there are two maps here. One is more of just a map showing the area in streams homes going through it, and you can see that area again on the west side of Wildwood Lake Road, and then where it's located at, it's again in an E1 district, and this gives you a good view of the districts that we're dealing with. The blue, of course, is E1. The light purple is MU3 mixed use, and R5 is the mustard color. Developer submitted a number of items. This was an item of just an Alta survey showing the property, and as you can see, it's that right now it's currently used for, I'm not quite sure, it's almost like a construction storage site, and it's been used that way for years by the Pelia family. They are proposing to put around 200 units on the site, all attached units, and those units are terrace-style townhome, 2-story, front loading garages, and they're about 1,500 square feet per unit, 2 bedrooms, and then the ranch townhome, which is about 1,150 square feet, and they're again 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. So it's a combination of 2-story townhomes and 1-story, and they're all rental. As we look at the zoning map amendment review, 6 items, I'll go through this. The first item is the proposed map amendment is in accordance with the general development characteristics and policies of the general plan and any other plan or program of the city adopted under the general guidance of the general plan. Well, this area actually has had a lot of planning in this area, believe it or not. And I'll show you some maps. In 1978, Northampton saw this area as a transitional area between R1 and industrial zoning. In 85, the township did a large rezoning of the Wyoga Lake Road area for industrial development. In 89, when the city published its 2010 land use and thoroughfare plan, it continued this goal of having industrial development on Wyoga Lake Road. The same goal Northampton Township had. In 96, part of this property was left out of the when the township zoned it to industrial. Part of it was stayed residential, and then in 1996, that property, the remainder of this property, was zoned industrial. In 2005, the city kept this and expanded upon this industrial triangle, which we ended up calling it, I think, and we even changed additional zoning that was either office or residential into industrial where there was vacant land to increase the ability of industrial growth. So when we look at some of those things quickly, the 1978 Northampton zoning map, you can see that this property is outlined in blue towards the end, and then the residential areas, or several different residential areas, were in yellow, which included a platted subdivision that never got built, and another residential subdivision that's partially in Stowe, and some apartments in this area, but the area on Steele's Corners and part of this property was zoned industrial, changed to industrial. In 1985, the map on the right, the township went ahead and created a much larger industrial area. And one of the reasons, this was one of the only areas in the township that had water and sewer. And so that's why you see a lot of stuff crammed into one corridor, and also on State Road. In the 60s, it got sewer and there was water, and that's when the 2 schools were built, the apartments were built. And I assume that the township didn't want to see, they wanted to see more industrial growth versus residential. And that's why in 85, they changed it to mostly industrial. And then in 96, in your report, you had a staff report actually from Blue Sharp about the rezoning of partial of the lower portion or the northern portion of this property to industrial, and that area, that shows the ordinance 144 1996, and you can see where the area proposed for rezoning, that little area was one of the only areas in that west of Wyoga Lake Road that was still zoned residential, and so they changed that to industrial park. So move on to 2005 when we did the charrettes and we looked at the Northampton area. One of the things in our plan, it says the Northampton Employment District is the most important job producer in the city. It is the largest industrial district in the city where the majority of industrial jobs in the city are located. And this is that large triangle between State Road and Wyoga Lake Road. The area is also where the city can experience new employment growth because of the availability of undeveloped land. Because of this, the city is proposing that Northampton Employment District be expanded and that light industrial, clean industrial service office and limited retail uses be allowed in this area. And we even had some design standards when we did the charrette, and the table that we have that's part of the plan talks about the Northampton Employment District assembling land on State Road and Cochrane Roads and recruiting the industrial firms for this district. When we were doing Tansen Park, I pulled the old recommendations and I said, oh, these are pretty interesting. I should pull these more often. But this is when we first start looking at the different areas. We had what we call steering committees of residents in the Ward 8 charrette recommendation. And then they carried over into when we did the charrette, and then we carried these over where people agreed to into coding. And so a couple of the things was, and it was an issue back then, and discouraged the development of new apartments in Ward 8, which is Northampton, and new, more consistent zoning should be created in Wyoga Lake Road, and then manage industrial development better in the ward. And so that's why we changed, we took that area and we made it more industrial than what it was. We couldn't do it everywhere. And then we created All State Road as E1, almost all the way from Ascot Park to Steele's Corners, and then on Wyoga Lake Road from Graham on the east side, and then partially on the west side, all the way to Seasons Road. So we made those changes in 2005 to follow what the recommendations were. So when we look at one, that's the reason why this is industrial, the criteria. It's been since 40 years of land use policy, and it still exists as our land use policy. Second criteria is the proposed map amendment is in accordance with the general development pattern and the character of the planning area in which the land is located. The general land use development patterns in this area of Wyoga Lake Road have not really changed in 50 years, even with the post-merger industrial development. The schools take up a big portion of this area. The apartment complexes take a good portion of it. So you've seen pockets of growth north of this site on Steele's Corners. You've seen some growth at the intersection of Steele's Corners and Wyoga Lake Road. So the growth has occurred, and because this area is somewhat quirky because of the schools and they take a big area, there's pockets of 20, 30 acres that are undeveloped. And those were the areas that were vacant, and we would foresee growth there. A large portion of Wyoga Lake Road, Steele's Corners, includes several large apartment complexes, Walsh Jesuit, Cuyahoga Valley, Christian Academy, Wyoga Lake subdivisions, Again, all these were constructed prior to the merger. The piecemeal land use near the map amendment site. There's been piecemeal land uses near the map amendment property, and there's also a lack of immediate utilities. And one of the things that has hurt development on Wyoga Lake Road is that we don't have a continuous sewer line running on down Wyoga Lake Road. Water is mostly there, and so it's really the city's at a disadvantage of attracting industrial growth when you tell a developer that you have to run water and sewer to it, even though you're fairly close to a highway. Stowe has water and sewer, Hudson has water and sewer, and ours is spotty. Even though there's a main trunk line running at the border of Stowe and Cuyahoga Falls and Wyoga Lake Road, you still have to get it from there. And that trunk line is Summit County's, and that's what spurred the growth that you see in the northern section of this area. So the property is currently designated agricultural, and agricultural makes up 7% of the land area. And we have a few figures here showing that. So the pie chart on the left is zoning. When we take that industrial area between State Road, Steele's Corners, and Wyoga Lake Road, when we look at the pure zoning, 63% is E1. Not that all the uses are E1, but the zoning is E1. R5 is 25%. MU1 is 2%, and that's up near Seasons Road, and MU3 is 10%. When we look at the current land uses, it's pretty diverse. I mean, you have exempt, which are the schools and other exempt properties. This property is agricultural. I think this property and the property across the street, even though they're vacant, the county shows them as agricultural. We have 27% is commercial, 10% is industrial, and then 6% is multifamily, 15% is single family residential, and 13% is other residential. I believe that 13% is at platted but not developed area on the corner of Season and Wyoga Lake Road. So as you can see, the zoning is clear. That is our goal, but the land use is pretty spotty. Even though if you take commercial, industrial, and agricultural, it still makes a slight majority of the land use. Next item is the proposed map amendment is in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare. The R5 zoning map amendment and the eventual residential development will directly benefit the city through construction of new housing, create temporary construction jobs, and it also help extend public utilities to the site. What I did include in my report is we include this in these big projects now just to show you what the impact is. We talk about public health, safety, and welfare. The Urban Land Institute Quickway Impact Assessment, and it's just a snapshot. I wouldn't, bet the bank on it, but it gives a pretty good snapshot. I've been using it since I even hate to say, probably since the 1990s. Assessment, and when I put in numbers, it come out at 190. There's no rhyme or reason because it calculates what typically you could fit at the highest, at one of the high in this program, the highest land use based on development principles. It showed 190 units, and in addition, I did just a simple 100 square foot industrial complex on the site. The site could fit more than 100,000 square feet, but I just wanted to show what 100,000 square feet. So the Quickway impact analysis indicates that 190 units of residential would have a construction value of 20 million, not a value, but a construction value of 20 million. It's 30 million is if you value it for tax purposes, and create 267 construction jobs, and that 100,000 square foot industrial development would have a construction value of around 10 million and create 138 permanent jobs. Again, just wanted to show you is if it stayed the way it is and you had limited use, this is what potentially in the future you can see, or if you go with the rezoning, this is potentially what you can see. The applicant also had a prime management consultant economic impact analysis done, and actually they're pretty close. I have to admit, from my numbers in there, and I want to quickly go through it. I don't want to spend a lot of time. You can see this is the residential model. Project value, 190 units is about 28,455,000. Construction is 19.9. The population, it would add 389 people to the community, and it breaks it out based on averages of how it affects the school system, and then it shows how many additional school people and potentially municipal people you'd have to hire or could take care of that development. It's 3.5. The economic analysis on the right shows 267 construction jobs with the salaries of 6.5 million. And then it breaks it out. It's not as, I don't want to go through that, but it breaks it out what these people do with their money, if they lived here, how they're spending it. It only does that in the commercial type. It doesn't, or residential, it doesn't do it in the commercial. And then it had a traffic, it created about 1,138 cars per day. Industrial model, again, at 100,000 square feet, project value of 13.7, construction of 9.6. No one's living there, so it doesn't affect the school system. Total employees would be 138. It only showed 24 construction employees with 100,000 square feet. It's probably greater than that. It's at about 600,000 annual salaries, and then the operation, their annual salaries would be about 3.2 million. And then it breaks out jobs, and I won't go into that. And we go down to the bottom, it creates 595,000 or 995 cars per day. When we looked at theirs, I'll go through this quickly. The applicant may want to talk about it. They showed construction assumptions both in industrial and rental model, and they also did, since we normally give tax abatements, they showed a tax abatement model. And like I said, when I look at these numbers, they're pretty close. When they did the rental units, they had 281 jobs. I think I had 300 and some. So the numbers are pretty close. And if they want to address it, they did also, it shows what the tax values would be, which mine, I don't do that. And so when it looked at industrial, they had 127 permanent jobs. I had 131. And then they showed also with tax abatement what the benefit would be. They did their Prime AE did a trip generation. My trip generation was 1,300 and some jobs or cars per day. Theirs was 1,471. And so you take the average of this, they're pretty close. So when we look at this, both benefit the community in different ways. Residential, it's immediate investment. Industrial, it's whenever it happens. It could be next year, or it could be 10 years from now. And then they affect the community differently. But it just shows that which is better. That's what the community has to decide. But it does show there's a difference if you do rezone it, the property. Immediate impact. Fourth criteria, the proposed map amendment is consistent with the planning criteria of the proposed new zoning district and is consistent with the planning criteria of all adjacent existing zoning districts. R5 is defined as an urban residential district integrated into other mixed uses, urban environments, and buffering lower density neighborhoods from busy corridors. characterized by a range of dwelling types, smaller lots, high pedestrian connectivity. And then there's a table that we look at. Is this the proper, as the plan, what is the proper, should this be an R5? And it says there's 4 criterias: any area in the CR and Cuyahoga River and Northampton planning area within a half mile of a mixed use center is appropriate. This site is almost adjacent. Maybe a small portion is adjacent, but it's close to an MU3 district. Second item is multifamily building types within each eligible dwelling criteria in R5 shall only be allowed in areas that create immediate transition to adjacent mixed use centers, industrial, C1 district, or fronting on arterial streets. Well, this is a multifamily. The next answer you see talking about attached single family could have been the same as the multifamily, but we're really counting this as attached versus multifamily. So when we move to the second one, or the third item is attached single family dwelling shall create a transition between multifamily and single family. The proposed development would include 200 attached single family units. Attached single family units, these units create a transition from single family Bonnet Drive, which actually is zoned E1, and multifamily on America Drive, which is to east, north of the site at Walsh Jesuit High School. Is Walsh Jesuit High School. Also, Bonnet Drive is zone MU3, and the single family housing units are non-conforming. Again, when we do the zoning, when the township did some of the zoning, when we did some of the zoning, we created like Bonnet, that it is a legal use what's there, but a non-conforming use. And we've done that elsewhere. The next item is lower density single family detached dwelling shall only occur in lots that create immediate transition to adjacent single family uses. No multifamily dwelling shall be in place adjacent to lower density single family units. And so I really didn't look at Bonnet because it is single family. And so basically it says that lower density single family detached dwelling shall only occur in lots create immediate transition to multifamily. So there is a small section that is adjacent to this, but mostly this is a somewhat of an island. I mean, it's a quirky place across the street. There isn't any development. It's zoned agricultural, but it's vacant. To the north is Walsh Jesuit. To the west is Industrial Park. And to the south is E1 and MU3. In a small section of Bonnet Drive, which is MU3, which is a single family development built in the 60s or 70s. And I'm not going to go there. Was they had a letter from Tactical Planning LLC. I hope everybody read it. Proposed rezoning, the reasons why you should rezone it. And again, it was in your package. And it was their opinion that R5 mixed density residential would be consistent with established residential character in the immediate neighborhood. They also had a letter from Tucker Ellis law firm stating the reasons why it should be rezoned, and I hope you've read that. And they basically said the criteria for E1 district set forth in 1132.16 are met by the city and was considered zoning the property to its current E1 use. They basically said that it shouldn't be zoned E1. So you have to look at that and see when you make your decision. But I wanted to have that there. And we had one other thing. This really came in when this was a 60-unit single-family subdivision. We got something from Akron Metropolitan Housing Authority, which is across the street, and they were concerned a little bit with stormwater issues with a development this large. Criteria 5 is a plan submitted in association with the map amendment meets all standards of zoning and design regulations for the proposed zoning district. The map amendment application only includes conceptual layout for proposed and attached single-family developments. All Title III district zones and Title IV building site design standards must be met. I think one of the issues that we have encountered before is how the garages are attached to the units. Do they meet the code, and do they need to be modified? Either the regulations or the units with driveways. The next item is the application in conformance with the subdivision regulations. The proposed development has not been reviewed for subdivision compliance. However, it must meet Title II land division and infrastructure regulations. They're showing all private streets here. Typically, we don't like to use all private streets. We had French Mill Run put a new street in, public street. We've had public streets in Sycamore. We have public streets in Redwood. So this what they're showing is a little bit different than what we typically do. Going back to 5, the units seem to meet our standards for residential and zoning. So just wanted to mention before we move on. So what is the alternate decision other than other than this rezoning is I listed 2 things here. One is to rezone the property to MU3 suburban center mixed use. This would allow for the front of the property to remain commercial mixed use, and the commercial space would allow for future job growth. So we've done this before where, it's sort of like, okay, if you want to do residential, you have to meet us halfway and you have to create some jobs. Commercial office, the downside to this commercial office development may not occur for years. The towns, which is an attached single family subdivision, is being developed in an MU3. The towns, which is south of this, is on an MU3. The existing office commercial buildings on Lake Road serve as a job base for the district. The town subdivision was zoned from E1 to MU3. Now, the office buildings that were there have taken a long time to fill up. So the Wings Warehouse immediately, now is probably the best it's ever been. There's an office, a public agency in the one building, or partially in the one building, and a company that distributes medical first aid kits to industry in the other site. So it takes time sometimes to do this, but at the end of the day, you could have some jobs if you did it this way. Then the other option is do not approve the map amendment. The property would remain industrial and available for future industrial development. Again, there's no immediate, development potential. It could stay for a long time, or somebody can find it and decide to build on it soon, but there's no guarantee. So, Planning Division conclusions and recommendations. The 2005 General Development Plan, Northampton Employment District identifies Wyoga Lake Road as the last area for new industrial development in the city. Therefore, a map amendment from E1 Employment District to R5 mixed density residential would eliminate 37 acres of potential industrial property on Wyoga Lake Road and reverse a 50-year industrial land use policy and general plans. Future industrial development could easily create 100 square feet of industrial space with a construction value of $9.6 million and create 138 permanent jobs. A zoning map amendment to R5 mixed density residential would provide an immediate $20 million development impact and provide new housing for residents. However, the proposed residential development would also have a larger social impact to the city. Approximately 389 residents would impact schools and other government services. Based on the above conclusions and other findings in the staff report, the planning staff cannot find a convincing case or reason for this zoning map amendment. Therefore, the planning staff is not recommending the R5 mixed density residential zoning map amendment for parcel 35-00402 and parcel 35-00517. And then I just have a sample motion based on our recommendations for you. And that completes my report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Guerrero. I appreciate your very thorough, detailed summary of the issues regarding this file. So at this point in time, we will open up this file to the applicant, and I am assuming that's Mr. Modick. for Mr. Karam. Is that correct? Mr. Modik, would you like to speak on, I think we need to unmute you. John, if we could do that with Mr. Modik, if that's okay?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry about that, Mr. Modik, with a little bit of a delay there.
No problem. Totally understand. Appreciate the time. I'm trying to remember to have to, Greg Modik, 10474 Broadview Road, Broadview Heights, Ohio. Make sure I do that for you guys to start with. There's the introduction. So
Thank you.
thank you again for your time here this evening and in this format here. I will try to make it as quick as I can. I think there's honestly a lot of ground to cover. Certainly Mr. Guerrero covered a great deal of ground and a great deal of history in this area over here. And there's a lot to touch on, but what I'll start with is Fred went through it tonight, and I read his report, and it's one thing to read it. It's another thing to have it presented and listen to it in the context while you're looking at it as well there too. And, I think it boils down to a couple of things here. The conversations pertaining to the zoning of the property and the history of the zoning, and that's why it should stay here. I honestly look at it a little bit differently as I went through the slides that were laid out there tonight and put in front of us. I think it really tells a little bit of a different story, and it's not a story that speaks to it should stay as this zoning. It speaks to this zoning was wrong from the beginning. I think Fred said numerous times here, it's kind of an island in a quirky area. And, just pulling a few facts from the reports here that, there was 2 educational facilities, large multifamily apartment complexes, and medium density single family homes. And that land use made up a large segment, approximately 56% of the lands. And I was talking back in the 60s when utilities were brought up here. In 1996, when it was rezoned, it was because there was an area around it that was created as industrial. This whole triangle was kind of lumped in and said, let's make this industrial, even though the underlying uses were schools, apartments, residential uses, and said, let's try and make this industrial. And we're talking about a history of 40 to 50 years where there's been no success of any industrial development here. And I think that's indicative of this island, this quirky area. Honestly, it's saying that this big triangle, this big areas that was envisioned as industrial development grew and took off. Look at State Road, look at Seasons. And this area just never did. And I think it's because of what's around there. It is residential around it. You do have the schools next to it there. That's kind of, transitional up into some of the industrial up on Seasons and State Road up there. The reports go on to state that, again and again, several large apartment complexes, Walsh Jesuit. And I think if you look at that from that perspective, and we gave you guys a lot of history here associated with it from our end and our perspective. When we looked at it, it was, there's a lot going on here. And I didn't want to be presumptuous that I knew it. I'm always in front of you guys talking how I know the engineering aspect of it, and I can speak from the heart and the mind with regards to stormwater management, grading, utility capacities, traffic, things of those nature. We reached out to George Smeargan at Tactical Planning and just said, help us out here. What is your interpretations of the history? Similar to what Fred had done there. Also, same thing with John Slater. He has a great history of the zoning code in Cuyahoga Falls specific, but just in general as to what it was. And, with those reports, Mr. Guerrero highlighted a couple of them, but I think it speaks to a lot of the same things. I mean, Mr. Smeargan had a couple of things I'll just point out there that, the existing land uses on this segment of Waigo Lake Road is varied, but consists primarily of residential and educational uses. And that was always there. Those were there when the industrial was put into place here and pushed to do it. Goes on to speak that, the land use pattern, it's still consistently the industrial is out on State Road, and this corridor has stayed the same with 33% of the land as the schools and 22% vacant and 30% residential. It goes on to, in both Mr. Smeargan's and Mr. Slater's reports, to speak to the E1 employment district, and that the districts are most appropriate at the interchange of thoroughfare interchanges or where the district is served by at least 2 arterial streets. And that's just not met here. I think maybe there was some connotation or thought back in the day. I'm speculating, right? Because I wasn't there. And that industrial would come over. In fact, the industrial user to the west of this property had a stub and a paper, street coming through here. But with a massive elevation change, the stream in the wetland, a buffer against that stream, it just prohibits that from ever pushing out to this area. I wanted to point out, I think Mr. Greer already kind of hit it here, but Mr. Smirgan points out that it's professional opinion that based over 45 years experience of his professional planner, that the E1 employment district is not an ideal or appropriate zoning classification for this subject owned by the Pelia family. And further goes on to say that, the R5 is the more appropriate. Mr. Slater's report comes to a similar conclusion there. And I think that's important because it's looking at it saying the history on paper may say E1, but it shows that it shouldn't be. And if you looked at it through a lens now saying, what would the zoning code be if it were a blank slate? It doesn't fall into E1. It falls more towards the residential. Couple things I want to point out is that, we saw the application back, I think when COVID was first starting here with all of us, and we came off the agenda. We had an idea of a different residential type product. We took a step back, and I don't know if all of you are aware of it or not, but we worked very hand in hand with the city and Team Northeast Ohio and Jobs Ohio to try and figure out, can we do industrial here? The Pelia family owned it, zoned some of it industrial to get in there, marketed it, tried to get it to work, couldn't get it to work. We tried. We actively marketed. We had feedback from a couple of people that were looking for industrial sites about this size on this corridor, and they just weren't interested. And they were driven back a little bit by the distance from the highway, but as well as the surrounding site characteristics, being the schools and Wyoga Lake Road and the residential all around it there. One of the biggest things we got feedback from Jobs Ohio when we were looking for some additional funding to try and help and work with the city and make this work was that it just didn't rank high enough. They can't see a use for it in the immediate future here. It didn't score high enough. And they pointed out that one of their biggest downfalls were the surrounding area has a school and is mostly residential. Wouldn't truck traffic and noise be an issue for the neighborhood? And what types of industrial end users would be fit for this environment? They couldn't find a path or avenue to bring an industrial user to this area. I also want to point out that, across the street when the area was rezoned, it was for a mixed use, but it was specific to a residential use. And reading from the finding of facts on that one, amending the map from E1 to MU3 for the proposed residential units is viewed as being a better option, in the public interest, with potential to produce less negative impact to the surrounding area than industrial users supported by the E1 designation. So that was the report from Adam back when Across the Street was put in back in 2019 when that application came through your board there. So from a pure zoning perspective, it just kind of speaks to residential in this area. When I look at the history of it, when Mr. Smirgan at Tactical Planning looks at it, when Mr. Slater looks at it, and I think honestly, if you look at it, you'd see the same thing if you really tried to check those boxes side to side with a clean slate here and now. What I would like to talk about a little bit is some of the economic impact that was brought up there. Certainly, we provided you guys the studies from project management. You have the stuff from Fred. I won't dive through it in great detail there, but what I will point out is Mr. Guerrero pointed out the potential for negative impact associated with, city services and uses there. I think it's important to point out here that, what we're doing and by us going private, we're generating a substantial amount of tax dollars, far greater than what would associated with the potential industrial uses that were analyzed for this site, not even including the tax payment we all know that would come within there. And our product, we're looking to own this ourselves long-term, that we would be the owner and operator of it. We would have an on-site management firm to take care of the day-to-day stuff. And with it being private roads, we would take care of the trash removal, the pavement repairs, the snow plowing, the grass mowing. So there's not going to be that drain on the city services associated with that. I know a lot of calls come into the city that staff have to deal with associated with, my neighbors aren't cutting their grass. They put a trampoline in the front yard or Lord knows what. I'm sure there's some crazy things that are fielded through those calls there. But we have those folks on our site. So truly there is a very minimal impact, if any, to the city services. With regards to the school, quite a few of these are ranches. We're not age restricting it, but certainly it's age targeted that we anticipate here with either no kids or those that are coming in with kids. The kids aren't quite in the school district yet. They're just kind of getting into the community, living into it as they're starting their family before they go out to get that single family detached house. So truly, this is an opportunity to generate a great deal of revenue, almost like an industrial use, right? Generating great revenue for the city, for the school districts, without taxing them with additional students and city services being needed for it. With regards to anything on, police or fire or paramedics, again, we have our folks on site to deal with anything that may happen from a maintenance perspective, but paramedic wise, this is not an assisted living facility. So, we don't anticipate anything with that. I don't think any of similar communities have produced any great deal of calls on it. From a police perspective, I'll tell you, if we have tenants in there and there's somehow a nuisance to the community, we don't want them there. They're going to be asked to leave. They're not going to be a renter of ours to be in part of our community or part of the Cuyahoga Falls community. And, one important thing I want to point out as well is the impact to the businesses around there, whether it be retail, the restaurants, things of those nature, service industries around the area. These are people who are going to come into the community and they're going to spend dollars in Cuyahoga Falls, going out to dinner. They're going to have more income than your typical renter. I think you can see by the product we put forth here, great architecture. These are much higher rents than anything you're going to see around the area, your typical 3-story walk up. So truly, we believe this is going to be a benefit to the community from an economic perspective and a social perspective too, helping everybody out there. Zoning perspective, like I said, I touched on that. I truly believe it better served as an E1 for all the reasons put forth by Tucker Ellis, by Mr. Smeargan. So what I want to kind of say is, in kind of closing up here, I am wrapping up, I promise. We firmly, truly believe, and we spent many, many of months studying this. I think it's over a year since we first started with this, that truly the layout here we have today is the most harmonious with the surrounding area. It fits the R5 zoning. I'm sure there's some things we'll work through on the final stuff, as we always have with you, on the finer details of development and architecture when that time would come, should it come. But we've put in a layout here that's not your typical barracks 3-story walk up when you hear about rentals. We have a curvilinear layout. We have 35% open space. With regards to stormwater management, I know across the street they brought up that concern. I know in talking with Walsh next door, there was some concern associated with that stormwater management as well. Currently, as it's used, you have a great deal of runoff coming out untreated out there. It's a material storage staging area that's going on out there, that has been for quite a while. We're going to over design the retention as we always do. We're going to leave the buffers. We're going to do water quality out there. At the 35% open space that retain, that's going to be a big help out there. Our architecture and our construction are the highest of quality. They're really going to be an asset to the community out there. As I mentioned, the city services, we have little to no impact on them. This provides us an opportunity to create an immediate economic impact for Cuyahoga Falls that even if industrial were to start here and here today, we outpace on an annual basis based on the reports and the analysis we put together, which are very similar to what Mr. Guerrera has on those projections. What we have to remember is that the industrial is an if come, or when will it come? Is it a year? Is it 10 years? Is it another 20 or 40 or 50 years before anything comes in out there? And when that does come in, they are going to be looking for tax abatement, and the dollars just really aren't going to be generated. So from that perspective associated with the financials, I think it's very clear, what we're bringing in generates the dollars without taking the services away from the city that would typically need to be paid for with those dollars. So truly, I just like to say that the E1 is really not the appropriate zoning for the area, and that the R5 and what we're proposing is giving us this immediate impact to the city from a financial perspective, and it is more harmonious with the surrounding area. I look forward to the feedback from the Planning Commission, how you guys feel about it, what you think about it. I'd love to discuss a little bit further and answer any questions that you guys may have with regards to this application, or if the public's on and they have any commentary that we can talk about. I just really look forward to that. So stop talking now. Thank you very much for your time and patience this evening. And that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Modoc. I appreciate the information. Mr. Karam, anything that you'd like to add at this point in time?
Yes, please.
Yes, sir. Please proceed. And actually, again, if you please state your name and address for the record, Mr. Karam.
Sure. Danny Karam, 265 West Portage Trail, Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio. Greg covered all the grounds that I was looking for him to cover at this time, but I guess I'd like to just talk to you guys about more of a personal piece of this since I've been here for 50 years in the city of Cuyahoga Falls. Back in 2003, I've tried to do this format that you guys are talking about that Fred reads out of all of these documents. When I look at this, I compare it as a hypothetical, which is what the zoning is right now, and reality. The hypothetical is industrial in that area, which we've already covered. Greg's went into great detail about that. We've spent 3 months or 4 months with Jobs Ohio and Team NEO trying to help the city and comply with what Mr. Guerrero wanted as it relates to the industrial. And Greg already spoke to you guys about the findings of that, which were not harmonious with that area because it's already multifamily residential. In 2003, I tried to comply with these zoning requirements and do commercial there, as you know, with the wing warehouse and the 2 other buildings that are there. So 17 years later, I put the trunk line that you guys are speaking about, $425,000 worth trunk line for the sanitary that's there right now. And you know how many people have tied into that in 17 years? 0. And that's the reality of this hypothetical zoning format that we're talking about. If we go forward now, that trunk line is still going to remain with only the people that are tying into it at this point is myself, because we're just putting in now some attached Towns of Steel's Corners, which is the only development that is going on in that whole corridor within a 4-mile, 5-mile radius. And that's because it's a residential piece and it's an attached piece, which is similar. This zoning, which we had amended last year, which is about a year ago, this zoning was just amended to the same or similar that we're requesting across the street so that we can have some activity within the city and bring in whether it's school funding and or income tax. As we see in this comparison, the income tax to the city is double from the residential as it would be from the commercial. So I just wanted to put a little aspect as it relates to hypothetical, which is what was presented here from the city, as it relates to reality, which I've been living for the past, let's call it 20 years. So I guess that would be all I would have to add for it right now.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Karam.
Sure.
Appreciate you sharing the information. At this point in time, we will close the hearing to the applicant, and we will open up the hearing to our residents and to the general public. Is that residents or general public? And so if you would like to speak, I see, I think Chris Gill, if you're raising your hand there, actually, you can raise your hand there, sir, or you can also just click on the button there. But as I see you, Chris Gill, again, when John unmutes you, if you could please state your name and address for the record, and please share any information that will help with our decision making this evening. So, and I don't know if Chris Gill is the correct name or not, so my apologies, please, but that's what I'm reading on the screen here. So, John, if you wouldn't mind, just please unmuting Chris Gill.
This is Mr. and Mrs. Gill. My wife's name is Chris Gill, Dr. Chris Gill.
Actually, can you please state your address, name and address?
Our address, yes, our address is 4366 Wyoga Lake Road, which is the property that abuts this proposed project and the change to the zoning. We've been here for 24 years. So like Daniel, I've been in the city for almost 50 myself. My concern is when this was originally proposed, you were talking about 69 single family homes. Now it's up to 200 rental units. which will approximately add 400 vehicles to this area, which is already congested with the apartments, which are on the other side of the street, which are on the east side of Wyoga Lake Road, with all of the apartments, Wyoga Lake Place, and all of the others, Maplewood, AMHA, all of those properties over there. Having said that, I'm gonna be the most impacted by this project because obviously I share two boundaries with the subject proposal. And I have to ask, and I know this is a zoning issue about changing the zoning to an R5. I have to ask, how many more apartment buildings, residential properties, rental properties are we going to absorb in this sector? We have French Mill that's been built. We have all of the existing properties across the street, which were built in the 1960s and 70s. I'm just wondering how many more apartment buildings Cuyahoga Falls needs, and rental properties that we need. And trust me, I am a landlord. I have been a landlord for 45 years. So I understand. I'm also a developer. I assist in building. I understand all the things that you guys are bringing forth, but I have to agree with the planning department on not proposing a change to this current zoning. I would like to see something happen to this property. They told me 24 years ago when I moved here that something was going to happen, and I'm still waiting. But I'm not convinced that this is the appropriate venue to take. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gill. Mrs. Gill, while you are unmuted, is there anything you'd like to add? I figure we'll give you an opportunity, or excuse me, Dr. Gill, my apologies, please.
Oh, thank you, but no, I don't need to add anything.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. And I know, Mr. Gill, you were asking kind of a hypothetical question, and I'm not sure if any of us can really answer your hypothetical question. It sounds like the question is how much more can the city of Cuyahoga Falls, or particularly this part of the Cuyahoga Falls, from a capacity standpoint, how many more apartment buildings can it hold or need? And I think it's really a hypothetical, and I'm not sure, unless Mr. Guerrero wants to take a crack at that. It's really just a hypothetical. It's a safe to say, Fred.
Yeah, I mean, we know when we did the downtown study, we were promoting more residential, so we know what the absorption rate is. So we can absorb more. The question is, we can absorb more. The question is, do we want to absorb more? So.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Guerrero. Is there anybody else? It looks like Mr. Modak, you've got your hand raised there, but we're gonna let the public speak here, if that's okay. Anybody else from the public who would like to speak on this file? Again, you can either raise your hand in the participant box there. I'm looking there. I'm not seeing anybody's hands raised. Or you can do as Dr. and Mrs. Gill point out, just kind of get my attention somehow. Okay. Well, I'm not seeing any other comments from the general public. So I'm going to close the hearing to the general public at this point in time. And I will open it up to members of the Planning Commission. And so I will now ask Mr. Habel. Commissioner Habel, would you like to speak on this particular file?
Yeah, I'd have a few questions. And excuse me if maybe I should know this more thoroughly, but I just want to go over this couple questions for Fred. We are only voting on the zoning change. We're not voting on the specifics of the site plan. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure.
Let me clarify. If it's either a go through subdivision or site plan review.
Right. So if it moves forward, it comes back at another time, similar to some of the other process we've done before.
Right.
Okay. And obviously, if we vote yes, it goes to council. They have the final say of that, correct?
Correct.
If we vote it down, does it still go to council or it stops here?
It has to have 4 votes one way or the other.
Okay,
And I'd have to look at the code again every time. I believe that it still goes to council, but it needs more votes
okay,
for approval.
because it would go in front of them without our recommendation. Yeah,
recommendation.
Yeah, okay. Just wanted to clarify that.
I clarify that for you
Okay,
later.
thanks. No, that's good. So not commenting on sort of the site plan in terms of the specifics of it and the density of it. Because I know that's a very busy corridor. Our firm's done work at the CVCA, and I know we studied that, especially on a high school night, and then in the mornings when buses are coming in, et cetera. But I look at that as an island, and I know Fred, you mentioned it as well, and it looks like if that were to be developed industrial, would there be able to have access to that land from State Road, sort of in some kind of connection? It seems like it would be possible, but not real plausible.
Yeah, just to answer that, I think your only entrance is on Wyoga Lake Road. Craig was right. You can't.
Right. And certainly looking at some of the development, on Seasons Road, I know it's on the Stowe side, the Fog development, which is right there smack dab on the highway, seems to be, that would be where I'd want to go if I, because of the highway access, if I were looking for some industrial thing. It does seem to me to be an island, and even though it's charted as industrial, quite frankly, I'm not sure that industrial fits there, in my opinion. So, I'm not 100% certain that, because I haven't studied the site plan to that degree, because I know I figured as such, we were looking really at the zoning issue. And so I really think this discussion to me is really more about if it remains industrial, it's going to probably remain vacant for a number of years, in my opinion, if it's been marketed already numerous times. So is this the opportunity maybe to step forward and maybe make it more residential? That's sort of what I'm looking at. So I don't have any specific questions past that, though.
Thank you, Mr. Hibbel. And actually, you bring up a good point that we probably just need to clarify for our discussions, and that is, you are correct. We are not reacting to what is being proposed there. I think that's, one of our challenges is that we have a lot of materials in here that, talk about, the proposed housing development, but that's not the question before us. The question before us is the zoning and the land use for this parcel. And whether it's that development or another development, it's the land use question that we're really focusing on. Is that a fair statement, Mr. Guerrero?
It is. I just want to make one clarification is that if it does get rezoned, then typically we do not like historically all private streets and no sidewalks. And so one of the things we would look at, since R5 is supposed to be connected and with sidewalks and streets, so we would have to work with the developer on putting those elements into a development, whether they're private or public. They would still meet those public street requirements, even if they're private, with sidewalks, tree lawns, connectability as much as we can on Wyoga Lake Road. And that is the question, is that Wyoga Lake Road is sort of an island. We tried that multi-purpose path that we put in from Americana and it really worked well, but it wasn't that expensive to try to allow people to have a place to walk on Wyoga Lake Road. So as we do these things, and an R5 is really an area that has to be connected to something. And so we don't want to create a residential island. And even though we're saying it is an island, it would be an industrial island. But the residential is more important, that people can get from point A to point B without a car.
Thank you, Mr. Guerra. Okay, Commissioner Locascio?
Can I wait and listen to my other fellow commission members? Usually I go early on this and then I don't have any questions, but I might generate a question after I listen to some of the other thoughts.
You certainly may, and we can certainly always circle back as long as your fellow commissioners don't do the same thing.
Yeah, then we'll be in one big circle. You're right.
Yeah. Commissioner Ricker?
Yes, thank you. Just a couple concerns with the property itself. I had read in there had been some flooding previous, or there's minimal flooding to some degree. Can either industrial or residential be able to mitigate that at some point? I'm not a developer, so that's why I was questioning, is one better than the other possibly in regards to the flooding, or is that all just considered wetlands and then there's special development for just wetlands?
I'll give my answer. Maybe Greg could add to it, but I think engineering, we can take care of either one in retention. There is a wetland area that wouldn't be developed in either scenario.
Okay.
But Greg, you want to add to that? Or?
Yeah, I just said that, we're not aware of any flooding beyond the typical of what's happening out there, right? But with residential, we're proposing 35% open space. My experience is industrial is more just pave it all out, right? You have big parking lots, big buildings, so you have more impervious area. Yes, they can put in greater retention to go with it, but then that reduces the footprint of that. So in my experience from engineering, it's typically residential is less of an impact because you have more breaks of green space, more opportunities to plant trees. So it does handle it a little bit better typically.
But you still have to meet our stormwater requirements.
Correct. Yeah. Either way you would, but
Okay.
there would be more green associated with the stuff for the residential versus an industrial.
Okay. And then presently I believe it's Akron topsoil is on that property. Is that correct?
Yeah, I know that was listed as one of the users. I think Carvo might be storing some materials on there now.
Okay, but with the property itself, there's no other EPA concerns or anything?
No, we've done a phase 1 environmental study on the property and there's no environmental concerns whatsoever. We've done soil boring. Soils are suitable other than a larger layer of some unsuitable material that we can easily handle in residential with the greater open space areas versus industrial. The challenge with that is there's a massive amount of material that would have to be hauled off the site or stockpiled, reducing the developable area of the industrial.
Okay. And then Fred, you had mentioned in one of your slides that an MU3 might be an alternative.
Well, I look at, as a potential alternative, and we did point to the project where the Towns is. And actually, most of that is built on, right now, it's built on the MU that was already there. We were able to do attached single family to office retail. And so the E1 that was changed really was to the north of that hasn't been developed, and also to the east, which was wetlands. And that site is a little bit different than this site, and I know it because of the amount of wetlands that couldn't be developed that we changed the zoning to because we knew it was never going to be developed. This is a little bit different. It can be developed, not like that. I forget the owner or the name that owned that property prior to the Towns. That was always the problem with that. When you looked at it, it really couldn't be developed, even though Mr. Carroll built the units that would go into it, would lead into that development. Is once you got there was very little land to develop because it was wetlands. So it is an option. What all that I'm saying is that if you wanted to create a job component, that was one way of doing it.
Right. Okay. I was just looking for some clarification. And then lastly, I know Mr. Modick had mentioned that he felt that, with the 200 attached dwellings there, and it's kind of self-contained with their own management team and taking care of the snow plowing and all that. But the city services would not be impacted or greatly impacted. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, it would be. I mean, we
What
don't,
I'm talking about, because I mean,
Yeah.
you put 200 people in an area like that, you're going to need city and fire. I mean, it's
oh
gonna,
yeah, those you would.
there's going to be some impact.
One of the things that we've learned, not only me, is that's why the code says is that even if you build a private street, it has to be built to our street standards. And that really goes with right away. So if it's typically what we require as a standard street, is that you have to meet those standards, even if it's private. And that's why we forced French Mill Run to do a lot of that. They have bigger apartment buildings, parking areas. This, you don't have that. But Redwood, 90% of the streets are public. We work with them on Sycamore, that the main street's public. So what we would do is we'd want to do the same thing on a development like this. But there are services, you're right. It's not just snow plowing.
Okay. I have no other comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Ricker. Councilman James.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. I'm conflicted here, to tell you the truth. You know, these parcels have been vacant all these years, and it's an island unto itself. And that we haven't had any kind of offers with the current zoning, and now we do have potential development here, but it takes a contentious issue when it comes to rezoning. I know that being on city council for years, this kind of issue gets a little contentious, especially on the council floor too, because generally speaking, council struggles when it comes to changing the zoning code in areas. But in this case, it just seems like, you know, you got something that's possibly going to benefit the city when it comes to revenues and taxes and development. But then on the other hand, in the case of the Gills living right next door, you know, the impact of these 200 residents or so that's going to be moving into this area, if the zoning is changed into a residential zoning, you know, what kind of goodwill could Mr. Modick and Mr. Karam give the Gills in reassuring that somehow or other they're going to be good neighbors and not do damage to their property or be bad neighbors in any way, shape, or form? Like I said, this is very, very, I'm really conflicted with this right now. And I'd like to see like Mr. Modick or Mr. Karam give us some reassurance about why it would be beneficial to change it into a residential instead of, you know, it's staying industrial or MU. Like I said, we've got an opportunity here for a development that's going to benefit the city financially. But then again, there is, like the Gills said, and as we all know, on Wyoga Lake Corridor, there's a ton of apartment buildings there already. And there's a lot of congestion there on Wyoga Lake Road. So I personally would like to hear how this is not going to impact negatively the people that live there right now.
Thank you, Councilman. Mr. Modick, Mr. Karam, would you like to, at least I think Councilman James would like to at least have a response to that. So I'll let you guys.
Yeah.
Please.
Absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to that. Certainly, you know, I think Mr. Karam for far longer than but I myself in the projects I've done in Cuyahoga Falls have always shown a willingness to work with the neighbors. And I have no issue, whatever the appropriate mechanism may be, to get the Gills my contact information, to come sit down and talk with them and show them the plan that we're putting forth here. If I'm understanding which their property is most correctly, you know, they're to the south of us, and You know, we're doing a great deal of stormwater management to reduce the runoff that's currently coming off of them through those asphalt grindings that are out there, through the mulch piles that are out there. So from the flooding, stormwater management, water quality perspective, there's no doubt in my mind that we will better that area there. You know, from a screening or a use perspective, I'd start by saying, you know, a large industrial user that has constant truck traffic in and out, or you know, is a distribution center of sorts, things like of that nature that are allowable by code. They're built a lot higher, so you have the visual impact, but then you have that different traffic, not vehicular vehicles for residential, but truck traffic coming in and out. You know, our units, we make sure that we put the lower ranch units next to them where it's visible. And then we will put in the appropriate screening with trees. You know, I always pride myself on going out there and looking at it. We draw landscape plans that speak to creating buffers, but when you get out there, you go, on paper, I didn't see that those trees are dead or they're very thin. You don't see anything down low, so let's put some pines in there. I would absolutely be glad to work with them from that perspective. On the traffic, you know, we have our preliminary report from Mr. Smith at Prime AE, and, you know, speaks to, you know, basically a lesser impact of traffic, just as the report from Adam back when he did it for across the street. The residential is less of an impact from a traffic perspective, but we would do whatever traffic study is necessary. I don't want to throw something out that's meant to be of a benefit to us as a developer or a developer for our property in any way, shape, or form, but, you know, I'm hearing there's an existing problem out here with traffic or concerns with it. I also hear funds associated with the city. You know, this project and the funds that it can create, even a small TIF associated with some grant funds from a county mechanism, a state mechanism, whatever it may be, to help alleviate some of these problems and do a full study, not just us, but all the way up to Seasons Road. I think it could really help this entire area out here in doing that.
I appreciate that, Mr. Modick. And from being on council for 20 years, I've seen you and Mr. Karam come numerous times in front of us with these developments. And for the most part, you know, they're pretty nice developments. And you guys really do a concerted effort in trying to help and be good neighbors to the people that live around the areas. So just to clarify something, Fred, when it comes to the time to vote on this, if we vote yes, that means we're voting yes to vote this down at this time, right? Or are we voting no?
You can do it either way. I mean, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to vote. You don't have to vote yes to turn down. Your motion could be, we're in favor of the rezoning because of our findings, which are it doesn't that it's not a good industrial property, and so now after 40 some years we think that it should be residential, and so we're voting, and if the motion says we're voting in favor of rezoning this property from E1 to R5. I just put that motion there based on what my findings were, but you don't. I would put it always in the affirmative versus in the negative.
So as it's written right now, then, if we were to vote yes on this, on your motion that you have written, that
Then-
means that we're turning it down.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Clears things up.
And Commissioner James, if I can expand on what Greg told you about.
Sure.
I probably have about 20 or 25 projects in the city of Cuyahoga Falls. And every one of those projects, I have worked hand in hand with the neighbors, especially even down on the other side of Cuyahoga Lake Road over the past 5 years. So, and we're currently still doing the same thing on open projects, that we work hand in hand with the neighbors, whether it's placing buffering, whether it's fencing and or pine trees or what have you, like Greg was speaking about. If a plan calls for 10 trees and we talk with the neighbors, or we need to put 12 or 15, we've done that. We'll continue to do that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Karam. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Mr. James, I don't know if I touched on the one topic you brought up with regards to residential versus industrial and kind of the impact associated with it on what I want to point out is, I talked a lot about the services we would offer internally with regards to snowplow and all that. It was brought up associated with police and fire. And I want to point out, an industrial user is going to generate those police calls just as well, and the fire calls as well there too. The units we're putting in, I also want to make sure we know that these are more townhomes. It's not your traditional, when everyone says apartments, I think 3-story walk-ups, right? That you go into a center hall or an elevator and everybody's living and going in together. These are really contained units. They have a greater architecture to it. It's a single kind of more owned unit. There's more pride in ownership there. So it's really a different target renter that we're going after when we put these in here. And what's nice about it is, honestly, with our new COVID world, right? We can enter into your own home. You pull into a garage, you go into your home. You're not going down that hallway or that elevator and sharing it there.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Modik. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Rice. That's all I got.
Thank you, Councilman. And again, just to remember that we're not making a decision based upon the proposed housing development. We're making a decision on the land use. So I want to be clear about that. Okay, Councilwoman, Council, I elevate you. Commissioner LoCascio.
No, thank you. Okay, I do have a couple questions. So initially proposed 69 units, and this is addressing the Gills concern, and then going to 200. How did we get there and why? I mean, outside of the economics of it, I get, the more rental income and stuff. And then what would the average unit rent for? I guess I'm curious about that, just because of the type of tenant, I don't know. But anyway, but how did you go from 69 to 200, I think is one of my biggest concerns.
So I can speak to that. We started with it, and I think it was a little bit of a leap in a faith off in a direction that I wasn't fully cemented in that, we drew up the residential. Certainly we've had some success associated with that in Cuyahoga Falls and felt that that's what the market was. So we drew that up, we put it in. We received a little bit of feedback from the city associated with the drain, for lack of better terms, on city services, and it caused us to look into other avenues, and that's when it spurred off into Jobs Ohio and Team NEO to go try and find that industrial user and create the jobs for the city, the income for the city, and we were starting to feel a little weak on the whole, just coming in for single family residential in the market right there in that area. So when we failed with the industrial approach with the Team NEO, we went back and reevaluated and said, what is appropriate for this area? And we studied through all the zoning and everything around it. I brought in Mr. Smeargan, Mr. Slater. You can see the reports are dated well after we first did our submission for 69 units. And the zoning spoke to us of something of a higher density. Now, some of that density can push up to, correct me if I'm wrong, Fred, R5 is up to like 15 units per acre. We're down at about 5.2 or 3. So we're trying to keep the density down. And that's kind of how it morphed into where we're at. And, the idea of the private streets is to try and generate something that's not truly just a pure residential community that you're driving through in these tree-lined roads. It does lean a little bit more towards the apartment community, but it's not a big sea of parking lot. You still have your roads, you still have walkability, and you have the ranch individual owned units you can be contained within your own area. These rents in this area will push upwards of $1,700, $1,800 a month for the folks that are going to come in here and rent.
Yeah, okay.
What do you say?
17, 18.
No way.
Go ahead, Commissioner LoCascio.
Okay, let me look here at my notes. So I guess for the city, any plans or talk of Wyoga Lake being widened? I know they said it talked about the TIF, but are there future plans for that because of the current congestion?
There are no plans in the book.
Steele's Corners because of Blossom or anything like that, or?
No, there's nothing in the books.
Okay. I'm like Jerry, I'm a little conflicted. I hate seeing that property sit there vacant like that. It's just, I don't know if I would call it an eyesore, but it's like, what's wrong? Because it's been that way forever. And I'd like to see something done with it. So I'm going to be thinking about this for while we keep talking. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner LoCascio. And John, just kind of for consistency, it might be better if we actually muted everybody with the exception of the commission members, if that's okay. I don't know, John, did you hear me?
Yes, I did.
Gotcha, thank you.
Got
I share a lot of my fellow commissioners' feelings about this parcel. As I look at it on a map, it is, I think Fred's description of an island is probably a good, fits a good description. I traveled that section of the roadway, and it is a very busy section of roadway already. Between the two schools and the existing housing development. There's a lot going on there. And where my reservations are is from a planning perspective, if we make this change, I feel like we're continuing to exasperate the situation. We're contributing to it without really addressing the long-range planning perspectives of it. And I appreciate, Mr. Karam, I appreciate Mr. Modak. You all are regular visitors to our body here, and you definitely invest in this community, and I'm grateful to you for that. But on this particular instance, I'm not there yet. I guess my gut instinct on this, and I realize, Mr. Guerrero, you offered us a couple alternatives. You mentioned obviously the MU3, but I guess what I'm still not, even if we did the MU3, I still feel from a connectivity standpoint, this parcel has challenges. And until we address the connectivity aspects of it, I don't know that those issues are going to be resolved because of the way this part of the city has developed. And so I also am conflicted, but and Councilman James, I really appreciate your comment there about how, sometimes when you change the zoning code, it's contentious on council. I really appreciate that. I guess the other bottom line for me, and I think that's actually why I wanted to close with that comment, Councilman, is that, if we're going to reverse something, it's got to be for a good reason. I got to feel like, everything's lined up and it fits. And I'm not sure that it does, in my view. It doesn't fit right now. That doesn't mean it can't. Maybe after further discussion, I would feel, like this just merits further discussion. In order for me to say to you, Councilman James, or any other member of council, here's why we're making the decision we're making. I appreciate the development proposal we got on the table. I truly do. I don't take that lightly. But I don't feel like we're enhancing it. I think we're just adding to what's already there because it's already there. And that's not I don't feel like that's a good planning decision. So those are my comments. I don't know if that's helpful, Mr. Guerrero. I mean, did that last statement make any sense, Fred? I mean, it's just, I just feel like maybe this could and should be studied a little bit more.
Well, I mean, that's how you feel. I mean, it is a big decision, and I think that's the hesitancy. What staff looked at is that, we've dealt with this before, but we don't have a lot of industrial properties left, and that's a big issue. And they're not all, they're not all Jobs Ohio ready. We applied with them and worked with them, and they worked. Danny and Greg put work into that, and it's just that I think as an industrial property, it's more of a specific use. There's somebody looking for an industrial use. It's not a bad area. It's not perfect. It's not right off the highway. We understand that. But Jobs Ohio likes bigger acreage and they like right by the highway. If they're going to spend, the state's going to spend money. They had a special program that we found out about and we applied and they didn't like it. But that doesn't mean it's not a bad industrial property. It's not maybe an A+ industrial property, but it could. And that's what bothers. That's what sort of bothers me is when I look at the city, I look at the different components, and I think an industrial component is important. And in the right situation, when we have acres of 25 to 30 acres, it's a good industrial site to me, because we don't have too many of those, maybe only 2 or 3 in the city. So, we struggled with this with Sycamore too, if you recall.
Yeah.
We just felt Sycamore, because of it was a golf course and it made more sense. This one here, I struggle with it.
Yeah.
Mr. Rice,
Yes.
would there be a possibility of maybe holding this for right now? Because it seems to me that there's a lot of conflicting statements going on right now. And, you know, I'm telling you right now, I'm having a rough time wrapping myself around this concept right now.
Right.
And I wouldn't feel comfortable voting either way right now.
That's a fair point, Councilman. I believe our options are either voting either for or against, voting for the zoning change or against the zoning change. Or I believe that we do have the capacity to table it, but I think there's a time period in which we table it. And I think if we were to do that route, and again, Mr. Guerra, Mr. Paul, correct me if I misstate anything, we would have to, identify what issues and why we're tabling it to basically flesh this out further. And then we would obviously, at the next meeting, it would come off the table and we would, discuss it, and we'd have to make a decision. Did I summarize that correctly, Mr. Guerra?
Yeah, we have, without me trying to rustle through the code here, we have so many, I think it's 30 days. So so it would have to be off the table. I mean, you'd have to, so we'd have to look at it in November.
And in all fairness to, the applicant, I mean, we would want to make a decision one way or the other. But I would be happy to entertain a motion on file number MAP-20-0006. If anybody would like to introduce a motion, we can always have discussion about a motion.
I'll entertain the motion. It seems like Sandy is a little bit on the conflicted side also, and yourself. I don't know if that would put any kind of problems with Mr. Modick and Mr. Karam if we came back within 30 days and discussed this again.
Actually, what would be your motion, Councilman?
That we table this discussion and for further study.
Okay, is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. And so now we're in the discussion phase. I believe Commissioner Lacascio, you are muted. I don't know if you meant to be muted or not, but John, if you could unmute Commissioner Lacascio, please. There you go.
Sorry, I don't know how that happened. I don't believe there's a discussion on a motion to table.
There's no discussion on motion to table? Okay,
In my Robert's rules, but I don't think there is.
okay, okay. So I stand corrected. If there's no discussion on motion to table,
Greg had his hand up. I'm not sure though.
yeah, I
If
think
there's
the only,
discussion, I'd like to make a statement, but if it's not part of the rules, that's fine too.
It says, okay, I can read what the code says if you like.
please.
Okay, so you could recommend approval, you could recommend denial, you could recommend approval of the map amendment subject to specific conditions, or you can continue consideration of the map amendment to the next scheduled meeting based on a need for further study or consideration of specific issues. No map amendment shall continue by the Planning Commission more than once, no more than 30 days from the official filing date. No more. We don't meet that. If the issue is continued at the original hearing to a specific date, time, location, no new published notice is necessary to continue the hearing. However, posted notices shall remain in place to the conclusion of the continued hearing. So I get it that we can continue it to the next meeting. So that's how going through all that, I think legally, that's what we can do.
Okay.
And we can continue to hear this meeting and further discuss it.
So it's the wrong terminology, tabling, so I apologize. So if you could just please, so Mr. James, would your motion be to continue the discussion on this and this file?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Habel,
I'll say.
second, okay, you agree to that second? I
Yes.
believe we can at least, so now we can still discuss the motion. Okay. Well, first of all, I guess, Mr. Councilman James, you had a question regarding any type of delay on any impact on the applicant. So is that something that Mr. Modik, you would like to respond to?
Yes, I'm okay. There's a lot going on tonight and I understand. So I'm okay with the regards to continuation. Not that I have a say in it, but I guess all I would ask is kind of what are my bullet point takeaways to go work on of what to address, what to bring back to you guys to provide you more clarity as to what we're trying to accomplish and what we can adapt to, and who do I work with in order to do that. I just want to make sure that the time away from you guys, I'm productive and bring you back what you're looking for.
Understood. So the answer to the question is no to Councilman James. The delay is not, does not negatively impact you. And then your question back to us is what more information would we need in order to make a decision? Yeah, actually, Commissioner LaCascio, I'll get you in a second, but Mr. Habel, you were going to add something during the discussion.
Yeah. Mr. Modik, for me anyways, I'm not so much personally asking for you or for Mr. Karam for more information. When I first read this and, reading the report and knowing, Fred's been a part of this community for many, many years, and his leadership, I think, has really helped to develop this community and really change it. And so when he comes and he recommends against something, they had his department and he has the professional background of a lot of years of experience, professional experience that I don't bring to the table. So from one standpoint, I understand and I agree to many respects with your argument. I'd like to really get more information personally is really about more of the history of why this should remain industrial, and how that could really be achieved, because if there are not that many properties available and this is something that's being targeted, but so I'm not convinced so much by what you said, or not convinced by what you said, but I'd like to just get a little more information about that history to prove to myself that it really should remain industrial, because I don't necessarily think what you're planning is all that bad. I think it's going to impact traffic and all that other stuff will have to be dealt with after a while, but I guess I'm deferring to the history of the city at this point. And so I'd like to get a little more background on that. Help me make my decision. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Mr. Habel. Yes, it certainly does. Commissioner LaCascio?
My concern, Greg wanted to know, was the density. I had questioned that before, and I guess I know that that's not what we're voting on, but it's going to be part of it if it goes beyond this. So that would be something I would be concerned about. But I agree with what Ron said. I think it makes sense to be firm and certain in our decision as far as changing that zoning. So.
Okay. Any further discussion on the motion as presented?
Can you repeat that motion, somebody? So, because since Lori's not here, I want to make sure we know what it is.
Well, Fred, it was actually the language that you used specifically from the code was that we are continuing discussion on this file. I believe that was the way it was phrased.
Okay. All right. I'll make sure when I talk to her that she looks at that section.
Okay.
Sure.
That's what we're doing here. I mean, the only thing I would add to Commissioner Habel's comments is that I do agree. It's more of, why should this remain? I mean, it's kind of built on Commissioner Habel's comments. I mean, we have a development code for a reason. we're very thoughtful about what goes into that development code. And so if we're going to make a change from that, I think we have to be equally thoughtful. That it just can't be because we have an offer on the table. No disrespect to the applicant, none at all whatsoever. It has to be that this is what we want our city to look like, because we're going to make a decision here on this that is going to impact what this looks like into the future. And that's our responsibility. And, you know, I do appreciate what we're being presented with. I truly do. But as much as I appreciate that, I can't focus too much on that, because that's one option. There may be other options out there that I don't know about. And I just want to make sure that we're making the best decision for the residents of the city regarding land use. You know, what do we want this to look like? So unless anybody else, Councilman, you look like you're about ready to say something there, sir.
Well, I totally agree with you, Dan. The only thing is, you know, forgive me if I've thrown a wrench into everything. I really don't mean to do that, but it just seemed to me from listening to the panel here that there are some unanswered questions and there are some conflicting interests. And there was one little statement, and I'm sure it was very innocently made. Fred, you know, I've been with you forever, ever since I've been on council, and you are the absolute best when it comes to what you do. You are an excellent planning and zoning gentleman. But the one thing that kind of stuck to me tonight was when we were talking about the density and we were talking about the impact of the new residents coming in and the change from industrial to residential to accommodate them. And you made a comment that you said, you know, would the city want more residents like this? So that, to me, that was kind of almost like, okay, we have a plan here. You know, we have a vacant couple of parcels that have not been used for 20 years or ever. And now we have this opportunity, and I don't know, is it that we want to earmark this as industrial and keep it industrial because of the only one or two sites that we have left in the Falls? Or do we want to not put it into a residential zoning because of, you know, maybe we don't want more apartments or townhouses or what? I just don't know. I don't know what you meant by that.
Well, I don't know whether we're supposed to be discussing now, but I guess the question is, it got back to Dan, and it's nothing against this development. I think that it looks very nice. It's just that we do have a master land use plan for a reason, to have orderly growth. And so we really have to think hard when we start changing zoning, you know, for something, because once we do that, it's gone mostly forever, 50, 60, 70 years. And so it's a big decision. I mean, and that's a good point with the apartments across the street. If the township didn't put high density there and left it vacant and had it industrial, it probably would have been developed. But you're never going to get, once something gets developed, it stays forever, at least our lifetimes and our children's lifetimes. So it's a big decision. And so the question is, we like new housing. We've done really great in the last, and this code has really promoted new housing, allowing it in mixed use, allowing, you know, doing the overlays, doing the R5s, but we thought about where we wanted that. And this is just a little bit different. We really never considered this property to be residential, quite frankly. So it is a big decision.
Okay, and just like you said too, I mean, when it comes down to changing the zoning code, it does get quite contentious. So, okay, that's it, Dan. That's all I got.
Thank you. And no worries. There's no wrenches thrown in here. I big believe that things happen for a reason, and I would rather us take the time necessary to really thoroughly understand and discuss these issues because, as Mr. Guerrero said, it's a pretty important decision for the community. So I think it's the right decision we're making here. So we have the motion. We have a second. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will now move on to the next file number, that is MAP-20-0041, section 1113.07 zoning map amendments. Mr. Guerrero.
Mr. Paul.
Oh, sorry,
will-
Mr. Paul, my apologies. I should have looked over there. My
That's
apologies,
okay.
Paul.
I was getting up to get some more water, so.
Sure. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. My name is Adam Paul. I'm the senior planner with the city. Thank you all for your time and your patience and your volunteerism, your investment in the city, and your willingness to sit here on your computer while we try to sort through all of this together. I'm going to share my screen if possible. Looks like that is so. And I am on to our item number here. So this is just, of course, the staff report, along with the plans and pertinent information that was distributed to everyone previously. As mentioned here, we're dealing with another zoning map amendment. The subject parcel is 0.156 acres, so substantially less here. And as with all zoning amendments or other plans you receive, it's specific to this site. So we're going to talk about it in that context. The general area is at the intersection of Portage Trail and 7th Street. The street address is part of what is 24047 7th Street. And then we've got the relevant code sections here for reference, which you just spent some time going through. And so I'll just get into some of the description here. The existing R4 urban density residential is a compact residential district in urban and suburban environments. And so this gives you a general description of what the R4 is, where it is both existing. You'll see that is starred on the parcel in question here. And then what it abuts. And the proposed site zoning here from figure 1 on the zoning map just shows you all of that. This is along I think a well-known and traveled portion of Portage Trail here. And this parcel just comes right off of it. And the surrounding area is characterized by a mix of other retail and professional office uses in the adjacent MU4 districts and single-family residential dwellings going northward from the intersection and subject property. The proposed project, and the reason we're here considering this, is that Dairy Queen is currently located and operating at the parcels that directly front the west side of 7th Street and the north side of Portage Trail at this location. The subject parcel abuts a mixed-use 4 parcel with a non-conforming single-family use. If confirmed, the rezoned parcel would become one of 6 total parcels to be incorporated into a newly developed Dairy Queen drive-through and dine-in restaurant to replace the current facilities. What I provided then here is the applicant narrative that was submitted, and that gives you some specific details about what they have there on site now and what they intend to do with additional space if they can get it. Moving on here to page 3 of the staff report. Sorry, I scrolled past that there, but you've got an aerial image of the area in question. I'm sure you're all familiar with it, but one thing to point out is that this parcel here that I'm going over, 0212992, is already zoned in this way that they've requested and part of the adjacent parcel. And so it's a little bit difficult to see, but what I see from the aerial view is what's probably a single family car garage here on a parcel that the applicant owns and is already zoned in the way they've requested the abutting parcel to be rezoned to. And then here we have a conceptual site plan, and we'll have to talk about this in general terms. It's obviously not intended to be a finished product for your review tonight. It is an integral part of the review criteria for any zoning map amendment, but it's not expected to be here in a format that you would make hard decisions on. But it is here just to illustrate the fact that they would the redevelopment of the property might take place in this orientation for the same purpose of the existing use that's there now. So getting to this zoning map amendment review criteria and the findings, the proposed map amendment is in accordance with the general development characteristics and policies of the general plan. The map amendment would not appear to be in conflict with this criteria and is suitable to the general development characteristics of the plan. And that's because we're along a mixed-use corridor at an intersection on Portage Trail that's already supported by it. Number two, the proposed map amendment is in accordance with the general development patterns and character of the planning area in which the land is located. The proposed map amendment is in the state Portage Trail planning area of the general plan. And that calls for reinvestment in local businesses. It calls for diverse uses and mixed uses that do exist there. And we are seeing some other reinvestment there, both across the street at El Mason and Drug Mart. Have both had nice improvements to the property there, and all fitting within the goals of the plan for this portion of the city. This is a map image with some additional detail from the general plan that just illustrates the state Portage Trail area and the neighborhood and districts surrounding it. Review criteria number three, the proposed map amendment is in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare, and none of that would seem to pose a concern. Number four, is the proposed map amendment consistent with the planning criteria of the proposed new zoning district and is consistent with the planning criteria of all adjacent zoning districts. For the MU4 suburban corridor code, any land directly fronting along an arterial street in this area may be appropriate for MU4. Higher density residential uses and non-residential in the MU4 should only be allowed within a certain district. We're not conflicting with that code by considering this change, nor are we with number three. If consolidating parcels, this amendment would be consistent with criteria number one above. And so that's because it expands that corner area at the intersection of the mixed use corridor. And it's also consistent with the type of residential district that would abut with the R4 as it does now. Number five, do the plans submitted in association with the map amendment meet all standards of the zoning and design regulations for the proposed zoning district? The short answer is the plans as submitted in association with the map amendment do not meet all the standards for the proposed district. I did have a discussion with the architect that was involved with the design, and he also met with city officials, including Mr. Guerra, and have reviewed some of these things preliminarily. As mentioned at the onset of this application, tonight's meeting is not intended to provide a site plan approval. It's intended to give you context for whether or not amending the zoning map, because it does carry importance, as we just got through discussing, is appropriate or not at this location. Cursory review reveals several potential issues, if the site were to remain in the current orientation. That's really just to give you some context, though. I think that the focal point of the application and your decision-making in terms of the recommendation you make tonight, if you so choose to, is about whether or not it's appropriate for this parcel that has a single family house on it now that abuts several other parcels owned and operated in this use at this area of a mixed use district is appropriate to rezone in that way. So number six, is the application in conformance with the subdivision regulations? It has not been reviewed for subdivision compliance. There are issues that would conflict in some ways with what would be required of this type of use at that specific location. And so those things would need to be considered. In our findings of fact, I'll read this for the record, and we can continue to address it from there. The proposed zoning amendment is really an extension of an existing mixed-use area and in a compliant location for proximity to an appropriately zoned residential district. The proposed amendment area is not a parcel of great consequence, being one that's 50 feet wide. It's a standard interior lot. The creation or expansion of adding to the mixed-use corridor is consistent with the plan for Portage Trail commercial redevelopment and growth, and is located at an intersection supporting the MU4 designation. So the proposal is generally in accordance with these associated plans. However, as mentioned, the plans as submitted should not be taken as any type of preliminary approval, as there are numerous site design issues that do not meet the proposed MU4 district limited use of a drive-through establishment. Provided here is a table. Hopefully that helped in your review and preparation for the meeting. It's just a restatement of the review criteria that we just went over and the findings as associated with those. The conclusion and recommendation. The proposed amendment amounts to more of an adjustment to the immediate area zoning rather than a substantial departure from the existing zoning map. The Dairy Queen owner operator has acquired the parcels making up the single family use at 2404 7th Street, one of which holds only the detached garage and is currently zoned MU4. Rezoning of the subject parcel contributes to a more buildable corner location in the mixed use corridor. It supports local business reinvestment with its change and aligns with general plan guidance for mixed use districts and neighborhood and neighboring walkable residential uses. The parcel is not substantial in area, and it would be logical to incorporate it into the mixed use district. That said, the conceptual plan appears to need some rethinking, and that specific criteria just needs to be addressed in this way at this meeting so that people wouldn't go away from it thinking that it can be developed as is, because there are standards for the mixed use district that would need to be met to do this. So the commission can take action in any of the following ways. Fred just read these recently from the code, but now I get to read them. You can recommend approval of the map amendment. You can recommend denial of the map amendment. You can recommend approval subject to specific conditions, or you can continue consideration of the map amendment to the next scheduled meeting based on the need for further study or consideration. Staff is recommending that the Planning Commission utilize option D, but with the requirement that revised conceptual plans be submitted with sufficient time for general internal review prior to City Council consideration of the matter. If I jump over to the General Development Code here, Fred also read this, and now I'm going to, that upon action by the Planning Commission or after 60 days from the submission of a complete application to the Planning Division, the map amendment shall be submitted to City Council. So that's what I'm referring to in that recommendation. And I'll also say, we have confidence in the Planning Commission and your ability to see that as a support document for whether or not you consider the zoning map amendment. And so you can make a decision in your own type of motion based on that if you feel comfortable and confident enough in doing so. I don't think that there is any conflict with our planning goals with the immediate vicinity or with the potential use. It's just really more specific to the site stuff. So if you don't feel it's appropriate, I guess what I'm saying, that it absolutely has to come back for review prior, you wouldn't need to do that, and we could look at it internally to help guide the process. Let me get back to the report. So sample motion is then provided that reads the same essentially as the recommendation. And that concludes my portion of the report. I'll be glad to help answer any questions or provide any clarification if need be.
Thank you very much, Mr. Paul.
Mhm.
I appreciate your very detailed presentation of the file. So we will close the hearing to the City of Cuyahoga Falls, and we will open this up to the applicant. And I have the applicant as Mr. Carl Werther. I don't know if Mr. Werther is actually here or if it's Dave Pellegra or the Marbles. I believe that, okay, the folks, the Marbles are actually raising their hand there. So if you would like to, again, please state your name and address for the record. And then please feel free to share any information that would be helpful to us.
Well, I'm over here on the right of your screen. My name is actually Aaron Haller. I'm one of the business owners here at the Dairy Queen. To my left here is Carl Werther, who is the president. I am the secretary and treasurer of the company. Not with us tonight is Kurt Werther, his brother, who is also a party member. So
actually, can you please state your address for the record, please?
And our address is corporate address here at 715 Portage Trail in Cuyahoga Falls.
Okay.
All right. And first off, thank you for everybody's time for hearing our proposal. Actually, we've found this entire process very fascinating while we're sitting here watching the previous proposal. So thank you for that experience. This is our first time doing so. Again, the reason for our proposal is we have currently outgrown our current footprint here at our existing location. Hopefully you've all been through and had a great experience here before. But we have a very old building that has been pieced together over years and years of add-ons and duct tape and whatnot. Over the past 8 years or so that we've owned this location, we've grown it from about $1 million in sales to projected $2 million in sales this year, which has left us bursting at the seams. The current COVID situation has also led us to, due to the cramped nature of our building, we've had to reduce headcount available to our shifts, which has negatively impacted our business. So our proposal here was to, find a way to expand our footprint on our current available parcels, one of which being the residential area to our north.
So is there anything else you'd like to add, Mr. Howell, or is that summarize it?
It's a general summarization of what we're looking to do. I would like to add, I guess, to start the project, we did go to once Dave Pellegra, who unfortunately cannot be here with us today, he's actually in the middle of the sky right now in an airplane, so going to Florida. So. But he came up with this conceptual drawing. We actually did present it to our neighbors to our north and northwest. We gave them first crack at this. We mailed the proposal to them. We did only get one response to our neighbor to the northwest. He was his general response was, "You guys do what you need to do." The one to the north, again, we have not heard back from. As far as they're concerned. From there, we went to the city again, as was mentioned, and proposed this to the economic development and Dave as well, or Fred, I'm sorry. And I understand the basic objection to the plan is just the location of the drive-through in comparison to and location to the property lines. So we try to get ahead of that a little bit with interacting with the neighbors on that, and obviously willing to do whatever is necessary to mitigate that if this ends up being the final site plan, as well as and also just going back to the original question of whether or not to approve the rezoning. It seems that, the question at hand would be, whether or not an approval tonight will give us, a concrete knowledge going forward of, what our options are to redesign the parcel should that be necessary, to try to alleviate the drive-through issue. So I believe that's all we have. Do you have anything, Carl?
No, that's pretty much it.
So
Okay, well, thank you very much. If we have any questions, we will definitely circle back to you folks, but
Okay.
Thank you for being here and thank you for sharing the additional information.
thank you.
You're welcome. So we'll now close the hearing to the applicant and we will open up the hearing to the general public. So if there's anybody here from the public who would like to speak on this file, please raise your hand and raise your hand in the participant list. And we will call upon you and we will unmute you and you can provide comment on this file. And provide any information that might be helpful to our decision making. So is there anybody here from the general public who'd like to speak on this file? I'm not seeing anybody from the general public who wishes to speak on this file. So at this point in time, I will close the file to the public and I will open up the file to the members of the Planning Commission. And I will not be calling on Commissioner Locascio first because I don't want to put her on the spot. I will, Commissioner Abel, could I indulge you with going first, sir?
Yes, Commissioner Price. I'll go as soon as Sandy has, Commissioner Locascio has her questions. No, I'm just teasing. I'm not opposed to what's going on, knowing that building, it's certainly the original building or existing building is a hodgepodge of things and growth. And so I think there's a great potential to do something nice and new on Portage Trail. And my comments, we're looking at the zoning again, so we're not really at this time commenting on the site layout, but I agree, the proximity of the queuing, really will need to be looked at, when you come back and screening. And I kind of question why the building is oriented so that the back of the building faces Portage Trail. You might want to, I would consider maybe rotating that 90 degrees and letting it face Portage Trail. I still think you could do the queuing appropriately and get enough cars there, but it just seems odd to me that Portage Trail is the commercial street and you're not facing it really with the front of the building, if you will. I'm not, I don't know what it looks like on that backside. So, maybe it's okay, but I would think you want to talk to Dave about that, Dave Pellegra. So I really have any specific questions, assuming that it's all going to be done per engineering standards, which I know Fred will. If I ask him that, he's going to say yes, and it's going to be there. And so I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Commissioner Abel, Mr. Guerrero, or Mr. Paul, whoever is going to be leading this project. Commissioner Ricker.
Yes, thank you. If I'm hearing you right, Adam, basically this is just an extension from the parcel next to it is really what we're talking about.
In terms of zoning, yes, and you're right. That is specifically what the application before you is, and it is that whole corner, that whole intersection, that
whole,
part
right.
of the corridor is made up of that zoning now.
Okay. No further questions, Commissioner Rice. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Ricker. Commissioner James.
Well, you know what? I really don't have any questions. I do want to say, though, that I was a coach for Little League and youth hoops basketball for years, and there were plenty of celebrations at that Dairy Queen after our victories. So I'm very familiar with the area. But other than that, I really don't have any questions at this time.
Thank you, Councilman. And so I suspect you've contributed part of those sales figures there, I would imagine, the years probably, right? Okay. Commissioner Locascio?
I have no question, just congrats on the growth of your business at this perilous time. It's awesome. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Locascio. I agree with my fellow commissioners here. This seems to be very consistent with the existing land uses that are around there. I appreciate you being in Cuyahoga Falls, investing in Cuyahoga Falls, and similar to Councilman James, I have been a longtime customer of yours. You may not have known it, but I've gone through the driveway on more than one occasion. And so I appreciate what you're investing here in the city. My only quick question is, Mr. Paul, as I read the recommendations on page 7, it appears that staff is recommending we utilize option D, which is continue consideration of the map amendment to the next scheduled meeting. But then the sample motion is recommending that we approve it. So am I misunderstanding that, Mr. Paul?
No, I think that's the way the recommendation initially came out. Between the two things would be to pass it on with requirement that we get revision, or have it come back to your level of comfort prior to doing so. Part of the reason the recommendation went in that way is because based on the size of the building, as a minor site plan, this will not be back before the Planning Commission. It always comes back to us for review, and that's where we're going to get into those detailed site plan reviews, of course, at the zoning certificate stage. And so I think you can, based on the evidence you got tonight, if you're comfortable in proceeding with approval, I think you can confidently do so, knowing that, when we have to get into the zoning certificate review stage and or prior to council affirming the zoning map amendment, should you recommend they approve it, we should see a plan that's going to be more consistent with the MU4 district than what we're starting with. That's all.
Okay. Thank you very much for clarifying that. And so that really would be my only question to Mr. Howler, Aaron, and Carl, is that I am in support of this with the condition that you understand that there are going to be things that are going to have to be worked out here between you and the planning staff. I would like to hear that assurance from you.
Yeah, we understand that. If a variance or something cannot be reached, we're obviously more than willing to work with Dave Flegra on revising the footprint of the building, somehow getting things moved to where we can come to some kind of movement. Going back to the one question about the orientation of the building, this does face Portage Trail. The front part is a patio, and then that is the front of the building that is pointing towards Portage Trail. And then there is the long side going north and south. On the side towards 7th Street, we'll have, I believe, some pictures and artwork. Yeah, pictures and artwork and some other things. That will be the main entrance on the southeast corner. There'll be some landscaping and whatnot, along with, again, some wall art on the back of the building and some other things facing that. So, there will be the main entrance is not facing to the north on that. So,
thank you for that, and thank you for clarifying that you will be working with the planning staff to address these issues. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thank you.
You're welcome. If there's no further discussion, I would be happy to entertain a motion on file number MAP-20-0041.
I make a motion that we vote yes to the map change.
Thank you very much,
I
Commissioner
can
Reddick.
read the sample motion.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and read the sample motion if you would, please.
Adam, if you can put that back up there, please.
Sure.
All right. Again, it says Jake Ricker, I'm making a motion. The City of Cuyahoga Falls Planning Commission finds that the proposed map amendment for for parcel 0200-234, which is 2404 7th Street, from R4 Urban Density Residential District to an MU4 Mixed Use Center Corridor. Meets key criteria of section 1113.07D map amendment review criteria. With the exception of criteria 5, the plans submitted do not meet standards of zoning and design regulations of the proposed district. Therefore, based on the review and findings of the associated with file map 20-0041, the Planning Commission recommend approval of the zoning map amendment subject to the following specific conditions. The conceptual plans displaying general compliance with limited use standards for a drive-through establishment in an MU4 district be submitted to the Planning Division for review prior to placement of City Council's agenda for consideration. Revision should be received with sufficient time for review within the code-specific timeline for council's determination on the map amendment. End of motion.
And I'll second that.
Second.
There's a second by Councilman Jerry James. Thank you very much. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is a file CZ-20-0042. Mr. Paul.
Thank you, sir. I'll go ahead and share my screen again here, and we'll get back to it. Okay. So the site we're talking about is the former Burger King site, the northernmost one, since there were two on State Road. This one just north of East Steels Corners Road. The street address is 4095 State Road, and this is a conditional zoning request. Applicant Carite, represented by Architectural Alliance, has applied for a conditional zoning certificate for use of 4095 State Road as an outdoor sales lot. The subject property is zoned MU3 Suburban Center, which requires the conditional use certificate. The property is currently owned by Molest Ltd. According to Table 1131-1, zoning districts and uses, outdoor sales lot is a conditional use in any MU3 district. The applicant wishes to utilize the existing site as an outdoor sales lot for used motor vehicles and renovate the existing building, formerly a Burger King restaurant, for a used car showroom and service. You're being asked to make a recommendation to City Council. The code references are 1113.08 conditional zoning certificate, 1131.02 zoning districts, table 1131-1 zoning districts and uses, 1133.03 conditional uses, chapter 1134 parking requirements, and chapter 1143 mixed use design. Again, the general location is State Road just north of Steels Corners Road. And the land area for the site is 1.89 acres. Subject property existing use is currently vacant. Again, zoned MU3, as are all the adjacent properties. To the north of it, there's a commercial mixed building there. To the south, there's a restaurant dine-in. To the east is a large industrial site, and to the west across State Road, there's another outdoor sales lot. The project background, again, 4095 State Road is the former Burger King site. Use category requires conditional zoning approval in the MU3. The area has several other automotive-oriented businesses, most of which existed prior to adoption of the code. The site improvements and building renovation would include lighting, landscaping, and compliance with specific criteria for an outdoor sales lot in an MU3 per the General Development Code. Excuse me there. So moving down here on our staff report for the project location, we've given you the zoning map and then the proposed site plan. more on that later because you were actually given supplemental materials. Hopefully everybody is in receipt of the email I forwarded with them in working with the applicant through the review stage. They had been engaged with us previously because the site required a variance. And so you can see that there's 223 feet and 11 inches of stated frontage on State Road there. And the limited and conditional use standards for an outdoor sales lot in an MU3 district require 300 feet. So Architectural Alliance and Cartwright have already been working closely with the city regarding specific code requirements. And that was the reason why you've got those supplemental materials. Coming down here, and this is from a page they provided in both applications. So they were granted the variance by the Board of Zoning Appeals, okay, to come see you for the conditional zoning certificate per the code. What you see here is a site context image provided by Dave Caldy, and it highlights all of the other different automotive oriented uses, several of which are also outdoor sales lots. Just within this immediate vicinity here. So that's to give you some context as you look at the requirements for the specific conditional use here about what the immediate area impacts would be. It's part of the criteria of a conditional zoning review, and this helps illustrate that this supports staff finding that we don't see an issue with that, and that it'd be suitable to the area. The planning district is, of course, the Northampton area. When we go back through the general plan and our specific planning district documents, this talks about in more detail about what you should find in a mixed use district within that planning area. It talks about, walkable streets and all the various details that are associated with it. A lot of that isn't achieved right there at that main intersection at State and Steeles, based on a lot of things, but probably the size of the right of way there and the long-term uses that have gone there, this is really how it's defined there in terms of the character. It's kind of already within that area. So general strategies there to allow for more suburban mixed use development. This comes up because we're considering, the code allows for a conditional use, but what was the strategy and what were the hopeful long-term goals there for development activity? And it would be to create something closer to what these mixed use centers are represented by in our plans. However, it's understood that you're going to have these types of uses, and that's why the conditional uses exist, so that we can have specific development requirements when they come through. And so that's what we're considering now. The code applicability from the staff report goes through that and explains here again which conditional uses require this type of review and why. And you'll find that down there on the list. Number 16, outdoor sales lot is one of them. The conditions and criteria, and this is straight from the code, and it talks about here, you'll see relationship to other uses in the general vicinity, as I just mentioned, location requirements or limitations, special lot and dimension standards, all those things exist with this, and that's why we're giving it the conditional review. Chapter 1143 mixed use design standards will be the requirement here. That's the standard that redevelopment and new development will be held to, whether it's conditional or not. When it's in an MU3 district, we want to see a good mix of materials, improved aesthetics and pedestrian access and things of that nature. And so the rendering we've got here is representative of that. Per table 1143-6, mixed use centers design material specifications, the following will be used as a guideline for building renovation review for the Northampton planning area. And then it talks about, the front facade wall shall be brick. That's existing. They're going to update and renovate some of that. Street facing walls shall be the same as the front facade. Side and rear walls shall be brick. And, you should have gotten the full packet of elevations that were provided, and it shows you this use of materials with some separation. Some of it is just aesthetic, some of it is material, but with the base body crown in aiming at meeting these mixed use design goals. Site plan requirements for proposed conditional use. And this is where things are going to deviate from the report. And we're going to go ahead and pull up the other site plan that was sent to us. First, actually, though, I'd like to go through some of this list here because I'm not going to go through each one of these items, but the applicant at my request, and after having, as I said, a subsequent meeting with the architect, Dave Caldy, we reviewed in detail what we were looking for, because you are being asked to make a recommendation based on the specific conditional use requirements for this site. And he provided that on a line for line item. As I said, I don't think it's necessary to read through each one of these specifically. It was distributed to you all, and it provides in his blue text here responses to each one of the code criteria that we reviewed and that's required to have this use in a mixed use district. And so long story short, they're meeting it. This is the revised site plan. And you'll see what we got here was some more detail specific to our aisle widths. That's now called out. The stall dimensions have been provided. You know, we need to see those types of things to ensure we're not just saying strike back over it and add whatever you need to for your cars. We've got specific compliance here with what our parking design standards call for. Over here, we've got curb cut widths that have been called out. I think we have some of that might exceed, but again, this is an existing site. So they want to maintain and reuse some of the existing circulation patterns here. They will be adding some parking area in the rear, but overall, they're maintaining the same type of site circulation that exists now. Some other elements you'll see here are medium buffer and some other what's called a streetscape edge specific requirements at the front here. And that's a hedgerow along at least 60% of the frontage. And then along the south property line, in addition to the 3 street trees that they'd be required that they're going to add here, they've got another buffer that's shown here to provide some additional landscaping and green space. So really happy to see the additional effort come in between these meetings and to have them, you know, really get into the code in detail and make sure that we're getting things that we specifically requested. I think that this site iteration here is representative of general code requirements for the conditional use. I'm going to jump back to my report real quick, which should be shorter now because a lot of those comments had stated that we didn't have them at the time of publication. And, you know, that's unfortunate. We just got up against it and wanted to make sure everybody had all the materials they needed and time to review this. And so hopefully when you got those documents last week, you were able to compare and contrast that with what I wrote here. We are now seeing the 10-foot setback area. As I mentioned, the streetscape edge at the front and a buffer that goes around the perimeter of the site. So moving on to the conditional zoning certificate review criteria, is the request harmonious with and in accordance with the general goals and objectives of the plan and the planning area? It doesn't align well with that. Again, it's a mixed use corridor district, and this is calling for, you know, more stringent design and development standards. So in terms of, you know, the Northampton hamlet and developing in that area with what the mixed use goals were, this isn't specifically aligned with those. But number 2, will the use be designed, constructed, operated, and maintained so as to be harmonious and appropriate? It will fit appropriately, and it will not change the essential character of the general vicinity. And number 3, is the use not going to be hazardous or disturbing? Use would not appear to be hazardous on site or with neighboring uses. Requires that we notify property owners within 300 feet of the proposed use, and I don't believe we've had any comment received from that time. Number 4, is the use going to be consistent with the intent and planning criteria of the zoning district? It's inconsistent with the intent of that planning criteria, but again, it would not appear to adversely impact adjacent districts, and it'll be subject to meeting all of the design standards that our mixed use requirements have. The site is designed in compliance with these regulations and all other applicable rules. The proposed development is in compliance based on the revised plans received October 28th and issued to the Planning Commission October 30th. And that's where they're showing definition of the aisle widths, the stalls. They provided employee information for parking purposes. We have to use that to correlate it to our parking code. We received all of those outstanding details, and staff review is, finds that it's satisfactory to meeting the general intent and the code standard in that regard. Number 6, is the site adequately served by essential public facilities and services? It already existed and operated previously was so. We had some additional comment here from the fire department, need to see plans with measurements as the project progresses to the planning process. I think once we get to the commercial renovation stage for the zoning certificate, they'll have what they need. But they'll be routed, those plans, for detailed review, and they can help interact at that time for whatever else they might have. The findings, the general plan and planning area goals. Planning staff finds the proposed use does not align with the general intent and planning direction of the Northampton General Plan goals and mixed use design criteria as described in this report. However, the code does allow for new uses of this type in this location that can meet a higher site design and regulatory standard through the conditional use process. Staff also finds that the plan previously as submitted would not be a detriment to or change the character of the immediate area or of adjacent zoning districts, and meets the site and district design concept for an outdoor sales lot in an MU3 district. The outstanding details have been addressed. I no longer share that same concern, and so that deviates from the finding in that respect. Staff conclusions are that approval of project CZ-20-00041 conditional use outdoor sales lot meets most standards of review criteria for recommendation of approval of 4095 State Road for conditional zoning for the use of an outdoor sales lot in an MU3 suburban center district. Staff concludes that the use would not be a substantial departure from the existing character of the immediate area and can meet applicable code standards through more detailed site revision. I think we've also achieved that to this point. The conclusion is based on the stated findings as detailed in this report. In terms of the recommendation, the revised landscape plan has been received, so you could strike number 1. Number 2, street trees and buffers, that was addressed in the text response and shown on the plan. I'll go into that in more detail again. There's still a couple stages of this review. It would have to go to City Council. Then they'll also need to submit to us for commercial renovation. And so we'll stay on top of that, but you could strike that as well. Floor plan details for compliance with parking have been provided. An enclosure meeting the specific requirements of our code has also been provided. We got a detail sheet on that on an elevation. Number 5, this one stays, that a refundable cash landscape site completion bond payable to the city in the amount of no less than 50% of the cost of quantity specified in the plan be provided prior to permit approval. That's standard for all developments, and we would need the same here. Number 6, all signage requires detailed renderings and application for compliance with Chapter 1146 sign design. And number 7, building renovation details subject to Chapter 1143 mixed use center design guidelines. That came up primarily because I'll have to verify some of these percentages that are in there. And Mr. Caldy also addressed another concern we discussed about the need to conceal any rooftop equipment. And so very satisfied to this point with what's been provided for meeting the mixed use and parking design standards. I think you can proceed with confidence. So of those, if you're working through a motion based on this report, I think that numbers 5, 6, and 7 would remain. Otherwise, I think they've addressed the rest of those comments that I made in the report, which is now concluded. Hopefully that wasn't confusing, but I am still here if you have questions or comments or need clarification on anything. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Paul. I appreciate your very detailed summary of the file before us here this evening. So we will close the hearing to the City of Cuyahoga Falls, and we will open it up to the applicant. And I see the applicant is Cartwright, and we have a representative of Architectural Alliance, and we have an owner. But Mr. Caldy, are you, or who actually is going to speak on behalf of the applicant?
Can you hear me?
Yes, Mr. Caldy, correct?
Hi, yeah, Dave Caldy with Archall.
Can you please state your name and address for the record?
Dave Caldy, 49 East 3rd Avenue, Columbus, Ohio.
Okay, and you're with Architectural Alliance, correct?
Correct.
Okay, please proceed.
I really don't have much to say, Adam. I mean, we work with a lot of zoning departments, and I'm just really impressed with the thoroughness and the reporting that's done prior to these meetings. It makes everything a lot easier, and just there's a lot of bases that have already been covered to date. So Adam, thank you again for your help on this. As you know, we had a phone call conversation a week or so ago, kind of going through some of the concerns, and that's why we followed up with the supplemental information. So I do apologize for everyone for having you potentially maybe spending a little bit more time and looking through two sets of information. But I do believe that we have, as Adam has suggested, we've addressed all the concerns that the zoning code is looking for. So I'm here to answer any questions about the building or specific details if there are any. There is a Representative Lee Wells with Cartwright. If you have any specific questions about the business, he is available as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Caldy. Mr. Wells, is there anything you'd like to add that would be helpful to our conversation this evening? And John will unmute you, sir.
Well, I want to thank everybody for having us on the agenda tonight. And, you know, it's been actually really good working with your community. I appreciate, we're looking forward to being, you know, in that location. We're pretty excited about it. It's kind of a neat spot. It's, you know, it's got a kind of a small town feel, but it's pretty bustling, shall I say, at least where the, you know, where the automotive sector is. So, and, you know, the work that Dave has done to redesign the building, you know, I think that this is really going to be a really good looking property. It's going to add to the community, I think.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Wells. And if you wouldn't mind just kind of hanging around, because there's a good chance there might be some questions that come up. So I appreciate Mr. Caldy, Mr. Wells, you being here this evening. So if there's nothing further from the applicant, we will close the hearing to the applicant, and we will open up the hearing to the general public. And if there are members from the general public who would like to speak on this file, please just raise your hand in the participant box there. If I see the raised hand, I will call on you, and you can speak on this file. We will unmute you. Is there anyone from the general public who'd like to speak on this particular file?
Mr. Rice, we have 3 people. It looks like they're on phone calls and probably can't raise their hand. Would you like me to unmute them to see if they want to speak?
Sure, that would probably be, I did not realize that, John. So that
We have Kyle Craven, Louis Caprioletti, and Vincent
Maselli.
Maselli. Are
I also see a Joe Twellmeyer. I don't know if that's
yep.
Okay. So
well, Kyle and Vincent are part of the Cartwright, you know, team.
Okay.
Okay.
Joe's with me.
Thank you, Mr. Wells.
Hmm.
And then Louis Caprioletti. And
I'm gonna go ahead and unmute him and see if he's has anything.
Okay. There doesn't look like they're unmuted yet, John.
I've asked to have them unmuted and he hasn't responded, so it may be that he has nothing to say then.
Okay, yeah. I don't think any of us can do anything in this mode here. Okay, boy, I'm not sure. We don't have the chat feature functioning here so that they couldn't even communicate via the chat. The chat's disabled, so. Well, we tried. Fred, Mr. Guerrero, unless you've got any, Mr. Paul, unless you've got any ideas about how we might see if they want to speak on this, I'm kind of at a loss here.
At the moment, live at the meeting, I don't, other than, you know, this is the format we've been operating in for some time. And certainly my contact information is available on the staff report at City Hall during regular business hours and somewhere on the city's website. So I can be reached if there are specific questions regarding procedure, tonight's outcome, the plans themselves, or any other need really that might come up as related to planning and zoning item.
Okay, and then I guess, yeah, they are. Yeah, they're still on my participant list, John. Can they hear us, John? Just out of
Yeah,
curiosity.
they can hear us, and I requested to have them unmuted, and they haven't responded. So
Okay. I mean, I could give them my cell phone number if they want to call me. We could probably try it that way. But I just if they've hung around this long, that's the only reason I want to make sure we haven't lost an opportunity. So, Mr. Twelmeyer or Mr. Caporaletti, if you can hear me and if you want to speak on this file, my cell phone number is 330-283-2410. I'll give you that opportunity.
I just turned on chat right now too. So if he wants to send a chat message.
Okay. All right. Well, we're doing everything we can. I want to make sure we be as transparent as possible and give everybody a chance. My phone is not ringing and I don't see a chat. So I am going to go on the assumption that there are no public comments on this file. Ms. Guerrero, were you going to add anything?
No, I think they have chat. It looked like Vincent Maselli is on a Zoom call. It doesn't look like he's just with the phone. So, but they have their opportunities.
Gotcha. Okay.
There he goes. Here's one.
There you go. Mr. Tolma, I'm the project manager with Architectural Alliance No Comment. Okay, gotcha. All right. So one down. One down. Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Twelmeyer. It sounds like you can at least hear us. So thank you so much. Okay. I don't know much more we can do here. So I'm going to go ahead and close the hearing to the public, and I will open up the hearing to the members of the Planning Commission. And I will go in reverse order this time. So Commissioner Locascio, you are up, madam.
I really don't have any questions. I think it's great to see the building, the new and improved use. Hate to see vacant, abandoned buildings, whatever. So I don't have any
Okay.
questions.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Locascio. Councilman James.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. And I want to thank Mr. Wells and Mr. Caldy to be hanging in here. This has been a very long meeting. So your perseverance is paying off here. I don't have any questions, just comment. Welcome to Cuyahoga Falls, Cartwright, and I hope you have a great business there. It's a nice area. I used to work just a couple of buildings up years ago when I worked at the Big Apple nightclub, if anybody
Oh,
remembers that.
jeez. You're dating yourself now.
The disco thing, yes. Anyway, I know the area well, and I think you guys do well. Welcome aboard. Thank you, Mr. Rice.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. And I'm gonna stop you right there before we start revealing any more secrets, Councilman. So
I'm done.
Commissioner Ricker.
I have no questions. I think it's looking like a really great plan.
Okay. Thank you very much, Commissioner. Commissioner Habel?
No, I one comment. Is the drainage going to be modified or to a new standard, or is it just to remain in that we're really basically have the existing site as is? I guess that's a question to Mr. Paul.
Thank you. That's a good question. They are creating some additional hard surface area at the rear of the site, but the plans have been routed for engineering department review, as they will be at the commercial renovation stage. And so if there's any concern or any, I guess, disturbed area, I think some of that is somewhat dependent on how they approach, whether they're just resurfacing or if they need to fully reconstruct. I wouldn't imagine that they'd be fully reconstructing the parking lot to that extent, but it will be subject to review by the engineering department.
That's
And
fine.
my understanding is that they'll be using existing facilities.
I think it's a good way of adapting that site. I mean, there are a lot of auto dealerships there, and I think, so it would fit in, and certainly, a new face to the design from, a tired old Burger King, yet they're using the building, I think is also commendable, trying to keep it as an asset. So I think it's good.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Habel. Like my fellow commissioners, I think that it's a good fit. I think historically this section of State Road in the city has been, really a destination for automobile dealerships and automobile sales and that type of business. So I think from that perspective, it does align. I appreciate Mr. Caldy, Mr. Wells. I appreciate you investing in this community. So welcome to this community, to echo Councilman James's comments. My only, just quick thought on this is that, again, this is really to Mr. Paul. When we make introductory remarks that it does not align with the general intent and planning direction, the Northampton general plan goals and mixed use design criteria, even though that's actually a lot of the uses of that area. So it feels like that's kind of an aspiration that we're trying to aim for from a design and planning perspective, but yet the existing uses are not exactly in alignment with that. And so that's why this is, acceptable for, a zoning change here. Is that a fair statement? I mean, because anytime we start out describing it that way, I get a little bit uncomfortable, to be honest with you.
I agree with your assessment in general, and I think that's what my review of the general plan and the Northampton Planning District revealed. I think Fred can probably speak a lot more to the development of that area and what the intent, the aspirational goal, I think that's a good way of putting it, was at the time for that particular area. I think it encompasses more of Northampton, though, of what you knew it to be Northampton than it could for that kind of wide right of way, high traffic area on State Road and Steele's Corners. And so, Fred, I'll pipe down if you want to make a comment here.
It is aspirational, although everybody is required to meet the higher standards of mixed use. So it's sort of an incremental change as we go, and the idea of just having commercial, which is probably more what it was before. I can't remember exactly what the zoning was before, but really the mixed use allows for more uses. And it allows for eventual redevelopment if it's not a car lot.
Right.
We're all buying cars online in 20 years, not having car dealerships, large car dealerships. It allows for a mixing of uses versus just a commercial use.
And I like particularly what you said too, Mr. Paul, Mr. Herrera, how it really is a higher bar, if you will, from a design perspective, from a planning perspective. So I like that. And comparing it to our conversations earlier this evening, I mean, this is a logical use in this area because that's what's already there already. And so it fits well. But I really like what you said about how we're looking for a higher standard, and I like that. Because to your point, actually, it could actually then drive everything else to raise up to meet those higher standards, and we just, eventually get to where we want to get.
Great.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for indulging me in my philosophical planning conversations. It's helpful. I have no further comments. I support this conditional zoning certificate file, and I would be happy to entertain a motion on, get my motion sheet here, on this file. How's that?
I'll make a motion if Adam, you would put it up on the screen.
Will, just a moment.
Thank you. I make a motion, the City of Cuyahoga Falls Planning Commission recommends approval of the conditional zoning application for outdoor sales lot at 4095 State Road for applicant Cartwright, as proposed in the file CZ-20-00042, based on the following findings. The use will be designed, constructed, operated, and maintained so as to be harmonious and appropriate with the existing character of the general vicinity and will not change the essential character of the area, and the plan generally complies with outdoor sales, lot design, and use requirements. Recommendations for approval is subject to the following conditions. 1, that's right. 5, a refundable cash landscape site completion bond payable to the city in the amount of no less than 50% of the cost of quantities specified in the plan be provided prior to permit approval. 2, all signage requires detailed renderings and application for compliance with Chapter 1146 sign design. 3, building renovation details subject to CH 1143 mixed use center design guidelines.
Thank you, Commissioner Lacasius. We have a motion by Commissioner Lacasius. Do we have a second on that motion?
I'll second.
We have a second by Commissioner Rob Habel. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes. Thank you very much, Mr. Caldy, and as also Mr. Wells. Thank you for sticking with us here this evening.
Thank you, everybody. We're looking forward to being in Cuyahoga Falls.
Great.
Thank you.
We look forward to having you here.
Thank you.
So
Have a great evening.
Thank you. We still have 2 other additional items on the agenda for this evening. The next item on the agenda are the meeting minutes from October 6th, 2020. Those were sent out in advance. And so I would be happy to entertain a motion regarding the meeting minutes from October 6th.
Motion to approve.
Motion approved by Sandy Lacasio. Is there a second?
I second.
Go ahead, Jay.
Second by Mr. Commissioner John Ricker. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? Any abstentions? No abstentions? Okay, motion passes. We now have to vote on the meeting minutes of October 20th. Is there a motion regarding the meeting minutes of October 20th?
So
I'll
moved.
move it.
Yeah.
So moved by Commissioner Lacasio. I believe was seconded by Commissioner Habel.
Yes.
Is there any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes. Congratulations. We are 2 minutes over Fred's estimated
All right.
TA.
I should have cut down on my staff report a couple.
You are perfectly fine. So Mr. Guerrera, Mr. Paul